us, and then my brain went to cosplay in Dragon Con. The best cosplay ever at Dragon Con, Stevie Wonder Woman.
No.
Oh my god, it was amazing.
No, the best.
Black dude walking around with sunglasses on and a fucking Wonder Woman outfit.
That's
it was
the two
awesome.
that I saw that I liked the best was Atreyu.
Story?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, who is it? The rapper who came with his daughter.
Oh, T-Pain?
Yeah, T-Pain, yeah.
Never
Are you done, by the way?
Yes,
it was amazing.
It was amazing.
I was like, what? I was like, not prepared for that.
Also, did you see Barbie Ross?
No.
No.
It was Barbie in a box holding a pallet.
At
and
Dragon Con.
I have a picture. Hold on.
So, I share a birthday with Malcolm S. Andre the Giant.
Nice.
Nice.
These other folks, I'm like, who are you?
Yeah, it's
and
always
why
like
do
a
I
lot
care?
of people that you really don't care about, and then one that's
I don't know who
interesting.
most of these people are.
Grace Jones.
Oh, I should have
nice.
Ben Foster. He's amazing.
Alright, so look. Pyrexian Reclamation, Psychosis Crawler back to my hand.
Yeah, I don't know half of these people.
I'm not going to play it this turn.
I should have birthday with Toby Lowe.
However, the rest of it...
Oh, well, that's awkward.
more
Not even gonna say it on the stream.
Wait.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
I shared a birthday with this meme kid.
Anyway,
Oh my god.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Alright, where's
you guys are not here to watch us.
I don't know what the fuck
You're
you people
here
are
to
doing.
watch this shit show because it's funny.
And I pay 2 life, 765.
Okay.
And I draw 2 cards because 2 upside down
I
creatures
shared a
come
birthday with a
in.
lot of YouTubers
Oh.
I've never
And
heard
What
of.
did you play that's a black enchantment?
Amazing.
pay 2 life and return a creature from your graveyard to your hand, which would be the Psychosis Crawler.
Oh.
Yep.
I share a birthday with Bruce.
But I'm gonna sit on these 5 mana and I'm gonna pass turn.
From Dark City.
And I really, like, literally all 4 of them have fucking abilities and I need to know what they do.
Are you done?
Yeah,
Yes.
pass turn.
It's their turn.
Do it.
Sorry.
I say you pop off Hythonia.
I am more than
And
happy for
force
us to
his
do that.
hand on all those morph things.
I don't give a shit.
And then kill Estridge. That's just me.
Well, my mana's doubled, so that's a thing.
Yep. I'm trying to remember in my hand.
So that's... Yay! Wait, that's gonna kill Hythonia. Why are you... You're killing Hythonia?
Counter target spell when I morph it.
Remember that time you said you had no counter spells in that deck?
I
No,
told
he
you they
said
were
there
morph.
was-
I told you they were morph counter
Well,
spells.
so we countered it. Now you could pop off Hythonia.
And you should absolutely.
It didn't do that.
You should absolutely do it.
Okay.
The mana's still spent,
Yeah.
even though it's countered.
I know, it should be topped.
Yeah.
You should absolutely
Look
pop
at
up
him.
Hythonia.
Look at him just waiting to do it.
I'm waiting for you to pop up Hythonia because I knew. I knew.
Would you like for that to happen?
I don't know. I might take Hythonia if you do that.
How much does it take to pop off Hythonia?
Enough. She's got enough
She's
mana.
got enough.
Yeah,
Just
no.
that.
Okay, I was like, does she have a surplus? Because I can make it not enough if she.
If you kill the Cage Sun, she can't do it.
I can only tap it. So I was like,
And
I can
Cage
tap
Sun
land.
doesn't tap.
Yeah.
And you could tap a land, but she'd still have enough.
She still has 2 extra, yeah.
Yeah.
it's whatever speed. Do what you need to do.
I'm thinking.
Or yeah, that's true. It is kind of at insta speed.
Yeah. So like you don't have to do it now. You just decide. Basically, wait until they play creatures. I have a 1/1 Void Mage Apprentice. It's a Wizard.
You also have the other things that are 2/2s.
Yes, I do.
They exist.
They also morph for things.
That's fine. But you only have how much mana?
3. I have enough to trigger any of them. I'll just
Yes.
share. I have enough to trigger any of them. One of them.
One of them.
I can only
Not
trigger
all
one
of
more.
them.
I'm perfectly happy if she board wipes. I'm not going to say I would love for her to do it, because that will give her some indication whether I want her to do it or not.
Yeah, but do you want me to do that or not? Would you like to just ask me to do that?
No, I'm not going to ask you.
I would like
I
to
don't
do
care if
that.
you do it or not. I got creatures.
Am I the only one who doesn't want it to happen?
I think so, yeah.
Do
No.
do it. Decision time. Because he can only do, like, one of those morphs, maybe. But
The
they
problem
could
is
have...
if she wipes the board, that puts this into the graveyard. I return it to my hand and manifest, and I have another counterspell.
Yeah.
Like, I'm okay with it.
Do you have
And then she gets to
What
start pulling
type
stuff
of
out of her
counters?
graveyard.
Wait.
Is that your only counterspell?
It's one of the 2 in the deck, but they're all
What
morph
type
counterspells.
of counterspell? I want to see.
So I morph it and I counterspell. It's 4 casting cost, but I morph it and counterspell.
How likely are you to do that again?
That's fine. I don't...
I mean, I have a Phyrexian Electromation. I'll do it as
There you go.
often as you'll let me have the Phyrexian Electromation back to my hand.
That's not good.
Do it.
I like it's almost infinite
I
counterspells.
still vote do it.
This is bad.
Because he's still...
bad.
So,
It's
look,
bad, Coleman.
If you
oh
did
my
it-
god, the best thing at Dragon Con were the stewardesses. Like seriously, Ruby Rod, and there were 2 of the stewardesses in the perfect blue outfits
Yes.
from the.
Nice.
It was great.
We saw a lot of ruby rods.
That's
Yeah.
not surprising.
A lot
so
of stewardess.
he'd have to spend mana to do that, so he
And 2 life.
either does it immediately or he doesn't. Like, he's gonna want to try to save one of his morph creatures. I don't know. It's up to you. Like,
You have to make a decision.
you do.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Because it's getting later.
And you can just sit tight. This is instant speed, so
Yeah.
wait and see what the fuck goes on over there.
I think this is all bad.
Sigour, oh, that's awesome! You share birthday with Sigourney Reaver and Johnny Ramone. That's all.
Nice.
Wait, you literally said Johnny Ramone from the Ramones? Like, really? That's,
There might be
We're all
that's like saying
old
Donald
here.
Trump, that fucking idiot from the United States.
There might be some children in the audience. I don't know.
Like,
At 12:35.
There might be
sorry,
terrible
it's
parents.
8:35 on the West Coast.
No, it's 9.
Hmm. Yes. Wow. Bad at math.
Minus 3.
oh, no, I'm
I keep
done.
thinking it's 4.
Right now?
No, the
That's not
4
time
difference. 3 difference.
Oh, I was very
Yeah.
confused. I'm done.
Okay. I didn't have 3
You
open.
are exactly
so...
where you need to be with that deck.
We tweaked a little bit today over a practice.
So the Carnifex Demon was great.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great addition.
We also tweaked something else.
Well, yeah, you added the Urborg.
No, we tweaked another deck.
Oh, what'd you tweak?
We'll play it next.
Okay. Red black. Did you finally tweak the? Yay!
We did.
Oh, it's the first deck I ever gave her, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't have given her a complex token interaction deck for
Sacrifice
first deck.
What?
And by we, I mean
What commander?
Jake did.
So it's
It's not anymore.
who's the commander now?
I'm not telling you.
Okay. It was I gave her a black red, and it was like Lizola the Blood Witch or something.
That's
Yeah.
what it was, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like sacrifice a black creature, draw a card and gain 2 life, sacrifice a red creature, deal 2 damage. And it was
Okay.
just fucking zombies and goblins. And for your first deck, perhaps
let
like
go.
generating a shit ton of goblin creatures and like
Yeah.
all these weirdo interactions is not the best idea.
No.
It was a lot for someone who'd never played Magic.
Who'd never played EDH before. So you met someone the other day who didn't know Green Day and Blink-182 were different bands.
Oh, wow.
All right,
They
in
have
my
different-
defense, they pretty much are.
What?
Blink-182. Okay, Green Day is way better. Blink-182 is ridiculous, but Green Day is actually a really good punk
Green Day
band.
is Jake's favorite band.
They're actually a really ridiculously good punk band. I don't know much about 182, so I'm probably talking out my ass.
Well, Travis Barker's a piece of shit human.
What's that?
Travis Barker's a piece
I
of shit
don't.
human.
Is he the lead
He's in
singer?
Blink-182.
Yeah. They actually, oh my god, and this is terrible. It's like so sexist and awful, but they actually went
Oh,
and
wait.
the porn chick that was on the cover of the Blink-182 album. They went and hunted her down, and she's literally like a meth chick living somewhere.
Oh, yeah,
and it's,
I know.
it's awful.
That's sad.
Because really, if you look at the cover of that album, wow. Shit. I need more land. I need a lot more land. Everyone in Blink sucks. Okay, then.
Basically, yeah.
I actually met someone a couple of months ago who was like, Mozart? What's that?
What?
Yeah, like, how do you get out of high school without learning of Beethoven, Mozart? Like,
Putting Octopus Umbra on Elderwood Scion.
yeah, because everything, all music classes are
What does
getting...
that one do?
They want you
It
to
gives
suck
it
in school
base
so you
power and
have to go to
toughness
the military
8.
so that they can pay for
And
your
then
education.
when it attacks, I can tap target creature with power 8 or less. And it's a totem armor.
Yup.
So
Okay.
it takes up to 5. I draw a card.
So phone charger if it's portable. Phone charger? My phone's been at 1%. For
Huh.
Yeah, I'll get it to you for a second. Roar. Is it my turn yet?
Nope.
Every time it's your turn.
Shut it. Go back to your home on our island.
And that's how that started.
Yeah, come on.
Hey, so
At least you didn't punch me in the kidneys yet.
Hey,
Yep.
Look who's,
Birthday kidney punch.
Ian,
Yeah.
look who's promoting
Oh, good for
the
her.
holder hoodie.
2 and a blue floating one.
It's a
To putting in
beholder hoodie.
Estrogen
It's not
Vocation
a
as a
beholder.
copy of Propaganda.
It's a beholder.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a beholder.
I actually
Something what propaganda?
I actually helped her do
I'm
that.
copying Propaganda
No, that's not good.
and floating
Too.
one.
There are certain people who are clients.
Yep.
Ugh. It is now plugged in.
Thank you.
Y'all.
So some terrible things are happening.
Oh no. So
Double propagandas.
yeah.
Putting
Well.
down a loyal unicorn.
No shit.
And I'm taking her up to 9.
She's up to 9 again. Look at that.
And I'm untapping these 2.
What is
up to
the
6.
thingy? And
So,
creatures who have power 6 or less can't blah blah blah. Right? Can't block.
Yeah.
If you have power 6 or less, that creature cannot be blocked. Correct?
no.
Read what the thingy does.
Which one?
The
This one?
or a creature.
So it has.
No, not that one though. The
This
beast.
one?
Yeah.
So power less than it can't block it, and then it gets.
Oh, block it.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
and then
thought it
gets
was like
plus
can't block
1/+1
at
for
all.
each aura on the battlefield. So currently it is an 8/8.
Right. It's unblockable.
Yeah. This now is an 8/8 trample lifelink.
Cool.
With whenever it attacks, I can tap target creature with power 8 or less.
Awesome.
And then I copied Propaganda.
So 4 to attack you.
Yep. Per creature. And then I also put out.
Remember what I said? Sorry, what was it that I said earlier in the game when somebody was concentrating on me?
My response was, I know.
Yeah, my response was, I'm going to remind... Oh, sorry, yeah, you're eating velvet layer. Shut up, I'm eating velvet cake. All right, you know what?
And then I just.
I will accept that response. Shut up, I'm eating velvet cake.
And then I just have Loyal Unicorn out.
Just. Are
and
you
then
attacking?
I draw another card because I played a card.
No.
I don't know. It's nasty. Got rid of my flying.
You realize she's got Hythonia, so if you don't attack and she pops off Hythonia,
Yeah.
you've basically, well...
I needed to look at the Elderwood again. Okay, it's not a spell, it would be an effect. But it's Trample Lifelink, and that's a problem.
Yep.
I'm gonna manifest something real quick.
Yeah.
With this.
That's not good.
So I'll do.
Do you have
2
to spend anything?
and a
Nope.
blue.
This
Actually, no.
card is recalculous.
Literally just a blue to put
Man.
Vow of Flight
Like, alrighty then.
on my Scion.
Yeah.
So now it is a flying 10/10
Lifelink,
trample
trample.
lifelink.
Yep.
That was an enchantment. I draw a card.
Oh my god.
It's me.
Yeah.
Alright,
And yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
any attacks?
I'm
Yeah.
swinging at.
Alright, she's forcing the board wipe.
You could just ask. Would you like a board wipe without attacking me?
I
Because I
mean,
can do that.
Well, it
I
doesn't
mean,
matter.
it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
either
Actually,
she's
wait.
gonna gain 10 life or you're gonna...
ooh, wait, hold on. Different. Oh, my back. No, that's an ability, not a
All
spell.
of it.
There's no like.
No, it's actually
Nothing I can push
my
back
hip
in.
separating from my spine. So it's great.
That sucks.
No, but thanks.
I'm so sorry.
The time you cracked my shoulder was great though.
I remember. Like we all remember the pop that was heard around the world.
That was my bones going back into their homes.
I
Coffee.
don't like the board wipe.
What do I want to listen to?
Can
I'm
you
gonna listen
stop
to
the
Electro.
board wipe?
It's Ash Magic.
There's way too much stuff like this.
I know.
No,
is
because
that-
anything I do, she can just
Why
do
can't
it in
Ash
response,
Magic?
There's
can't she?
like Tori Amos. There's a bunch of stuff in there that gets pumped.
Bowie.
Not whatever their 80s playlist is.
No, it's the industrial dance music.
Oh, I love this song.
Yep. Okay, what are we doing?
No, I want to dance.
I'm stealing my graveyard.
Yeah, I'm stealing your graveyard.
Does anybody else have flying?
No one can have flying. Oh,
No,
is that thing dead?
That thing died.
No, I don't have flying. No, no one has flying.
Okay, then I will swing at you instead.
You still at me?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Wait a second. Oh, yeah.
Just
because
that one
it's a
creature?
That's the one creature.
I'm gonna morph this thing over. When it morphs, return target creature to its owner's hand.
Oh.
And all the enchantments go to the graveyard.
Yo.
Poof. And now I have a 2/2 flying bird shaman.
You and the fucking birds. You just come out of nowhere with birds all the time.
The birds. It is a wind ice feather Aven. It's a 2/2 flying, and when it's turned face up, I return a target creature to its owner's hand.
Meh.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Where can I leave this so Bunny gets it? Yes.
Put it in my mailbox. Actually, so go to the front door. On the left-hand side, there's three levels. The bottom one is mine. Are you done?
Mm-hmm.
Untap, upkeep, draw. I'm going to play a land, and then I'm going to play a Trail of Mystery. Whenever a face-down creature enters the battlefield, I may search the library for a non-basic land card or basic land card and put it in my hand. Right?
I hope it's okay. I turned the coffee back.
Whenever
on.
a permanent I control is turned face up, if it's a creature, it gets +2/+2. Oh, and I forgot to draw a card when that thing flipped last turn. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Psychosis Crawler is in. It's an 11/11.
Oh, why is this so hot?
Oh my god. And I shall play this morph creature face down for free. Draw a card, everybody lose a life. Face down creature entered. I put a land into play tapped. Or into my hand, sorry. Basic land swamp.
Swamp.
The land for turn is a Ghost Quarter, which I will sack to kill the fucking Urborg.
Before that, I'm just gonna finish it up.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hythoni is mine.
Oh.
That's gonna
What
die.
did you
Everything's
do?
gonna die.
Crab?
Sorry, Chrome Shell Crab. When it comes, you can have a Chrome Shell Crab. It's gonna die to Hythonia. Hythonia is mine.
No, give it to me then.
No. Well, yeah, you get it, but then it dies.
Yeah.
All right, everything dies. All creatures die. Everything that's not a Gorgon is destroyed.
Yep.
Okay.
So do you keep her?
I keep her
And
until she dies, and then you get her back. Yeah. And so is my commander. R. Alright, that's turn. And Hythonia is a 7/9 creature. Death touch. Faster. This game's ridiculous.
It is.
Yep.
This is a ridiculous fucking game of Magic. Wait, hold on. And doesn't matter. That didn't matter. And hold on. Yeah, that's good. Well, I'll wait. Don't need to do it until. How are you doing over there? If you need to bow out because you're falling asleep,
I'm not falling asleep. I'm like, I'm going to regret this in the morning.
You are
so like,
absolutely like
basically if two more. If I don't have something awesome in like a turn or two, I'm just gonna.
That's fair.
Leave.
Like if you have to, like literally, you'll get home at like 1:30. If you, ish. Okay.
No holds barred, everyone. Make friends. Who's okay?
She made me.
I know because you want to. We want to get you to play a game.
I'll say it takes me like 25 minutes to get home.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Especially at this time of night. There's no.
I hope you get
on the
4
road.
at least. I hope you get 4 hours at least.
Oh yeah. No,
Okay.
I told my boss I was coming in late. So.
Okay.
Guess who's not gonna get that much?
Yeah, that's fun.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. You still have 12 mana.
13.
13.
Plus it's Friday. I can be miserable on a Friday.
Everybody's miserable on a Friday who stayed out late on Thursday. Man, are you old enough to remember Nation? Or did you not live here at the time?
I've lived here, but I don't remember it.
Just came up.
So it was, Nation was the Goth Industrial Club for decades.
Yeah.
Look, I'd rather be drinking blood at Nation's Gothics Club.
That's what that was. Okay.
But yeah. And Jay, the bartender, they had a special. It was free rail drinks for the first hour. And it would be white. It would be clear. Like whatever you asked for, he'd be like, "Here it is," and it'd be very vaguely tinted, whatever color the mixer was.
Feels like I
Dangerous.
remember.
I blacked out.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
no.
It's the best. Oh jeez.
So like by like even 10 o'clock, everybody's just blotto.
Yeah.
And it was 4 hours of Goth Industrial dancing for after that.
Yep.
And it's gone. I'm so upset.
I'm gonna be highly amused
The
if I
National Stadium's
kill
the
you
bottom
with
of it,
commander
so-
damage and your own commander.
Why?
Why?
Why would you do that to me?
'Cause you wiped the board with all my creatures.
Decisions.
I'm not good at making decisions.
How much? 12, 11, right?
Yes.
11 point exsanguinate. Everybody lose 11, you gain 33.
Oh, that's
After
math.
you said that.
10. I'm down to 17.
I'm at 19.
I'm at 14.
Hey, look!
If I can find.
Wait.
Who's the threat?
Target!
Been nice.
Hang on. How do I do this?
That's what you also want. What is it? Blood Pact?
Oh, what is that?
The little book octopus.
Oh, that is awesome. I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm guessing it's my turn. Right?
That's
Yeah,
cool.
it's
Yeah.
my turn.
Yep.
Since I had mana open
My favorite.
at the beginning of my upkeep, this is in my graveyard. What do I want?
Those are sweet.
Can't
Yeah,
kill
like
anything.
honestly, if you have a shit ton of cycling, you can start trying to. Well, the problem is you want us alive to kill her.
No kill.
Like you don't want to start cycling to kill us, because we're gonna help you take that 68 life down.
Life means nothing in Magic.
Hang on.
Yeah, really.
Unless it was that one streamed
Why would I
tournament
do that?
where it
Do
ended
I
early
do that?
and
Hang on.
We every now and again we get to a point in a game where like somebody has 100 life. We're like, let's just stop here
Yeah.
instead of grinding it out for the next 2 hours.
Yeah.
I actually played. It was Chainer mono black life gain versus Omnath green life gain.
oh no.
And we stopped the game where Omnath was at like 90-90 and we both had over 1,000 life. We're like, we're done. We're just done here. This game is over. We're not going to do this to the stream. We're not going to,
Yeah.
or to everybody at the table.
Yeah.
Like literally, Omnath was
Yeah.
at like
Well, that's
90 something.
That's supposedly what commander damage is supposed to
Fine.
prevent.
Right, but the point is, it was I could kill Omnath whenever, or you
Yeah.
could just pull all the 99 off and do something obscene like a 99 point Genesis
So-
wave.
Yep.
I'm tapping 7 to play the Hatchery Spider.
Spider.
Ooh.
I
have no idea what that does.
Nope, not at all. It's a spider, so it's gotta be bug.
5 creature cards in my graveyard.
Spider.
1,
Not Spooter Queen, Spider Queen.
I'm Spooter Queen now. I have 3
4,
spiders.
5. Okay.
Jay buries the spooter. Oh, you guys are gonna have to like fight. We're gonna have to throw you into a little
I killed 3
cage.
spiders in my
No!
We're gonna
I'm
throw
the
you into the
spooter queen, I won't
cage
kill
to
them.
fight over the spooter queen.
That was almost a whiff.
I got to hang out with the tarantula today.
Aw.
I get a Naga
What do you get?
Vitalist.
And when X is number, what does it do?
It just taps
It's a mana dork.
Yeah.
It's a mana dork. Got it.
It's a little one.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Look at that.
Yeah.
Who's it?
It's so pretty.
James Ryman. That's really pretty.
And they're done.
Okay, so at the beginning of my upkeep, I am exiling it, which means I can return it to the battlefield, and I'm making a copy of
What are you
Enchantress's
doing?
Presence. It's Esther's invocation, so basically at the beginning of your upkeep, you can copy
Every
it
turn.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. That needs to die.
I mean, we know about this stuff. We're just letting it happen.
I know.
I'll put down Bant Citadel.
I'm doing my best.
So let's just see
Go that way, not
what
this way.
happens.
So
There's
I'm,
nothing
I'm
to- yeah.
gonna ultimate her.
Yep.
So 1, 2,
We've let this happen
3,
twice.
4,
You still have the
5,
cage, son.
6,
I'll let her die.
7. So
Pop her off again. Is Esther dead?
nope,
She still has 1 on her?
she's got 2.
Ah, look at that.
So 3 of these weren't whiffs, and then I can return everything from my graveyard. That's an enchantment.
That's the
So
I thought it was 10. Or, oh, no, it's
nope,
everything. Yeah.
it's 7
You
going to my
now.
graveyard, and then everything from my graveyard comes back
Yeah.
out.
Oh, that's
So
awful.
first, it is non-aura enchantments. So it's
You're-
Heuristic
you're-
Study,
You're generally the graveyard removal queen.
aura. We got an enchantment creature.
None of your shit has flying.
Yep, everybody
nothing's
loses
in
flying
play.
again. And then the Umbras come in on the creature. So there should be one more. I don't know where it went. I have to find it. Where'd it go? There it is. Oh. 2 more. So let's see what this becomes. That is
Thankfully, it doesn't
You know-
have haste.
You know, there's a rule about playing against Estrid, and it's terrible because what it means is you have to kill somebody before they get to really play their deck.
Yep.
But if you let Estrid live, it will win.
So that's 8, 10, 12,
There's
17, 17 flying trample. Whenever it attacks, untap all of my lands, and I get to
Yup.
tap somebody else's thing.
Is it hexproof or anything?
No.
No, but it's got 2 totem armors on it.
It's how does it get to? How does
Because
it?
2 of the enchantments are totems.
Oh, which ones? Bear. No.
So I've got bear
Snake
and octopus.
Bear and octopus umbra. Got it.
Yep.
Alrighty then.
So I would say you should cast something first and then untap all your. Oh wait, it doesn't have haste, so your flying thing. So
No.
you can't attack with it yet,
Not
and
yet.
untap all your.
I haven't even
before
played
my
anything
turn.
yet. I haven't tapped
She hasn't
anything or
played
played
anything
anything.
yet.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's
All I
okay.
did was ultimate Esther just to see if I got anything
Well,
cool.
they're not hasty, so I'm not fussed.
Nope.
Oh,
Yeah, this is gonna be bad.
We let this happen.
We did let this happen.
It's okay, I told you.
What was the warning? What was the warning from earlier?
I was
As all
too
your
busy
snakes were
eating
killing my
cake.
things, as all your snakes were killing me.
This is
Hey.
also your fault. It's all of us. It's all of our fault.
And you know
I
what?
told y'all what was gonna happen with Estrid.
That's all I'm gonna do.
You've had this experience with another player piloting Estrid.
hey.
Which
Are
you
you-
know, there's not any animosity here yet.
And that is all I'm doing.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a
I'm
lot
gonna
of
play
money.
that.
Yeah, it is.
I'm gonna tap that to manifest that thing.
Did you play a spell?
No.
Okay.
I tapped the thing to manifest the thing. Why?
Why?
You draw-
Heuristic Study.
Yeah.
And what does that do?
Whenever anybody plays a spell, they pay 1 or she draws a card.
Okay, that one.
That's the Allison card.
And you've
I
definitely
play it.
played it.
Yeah, every now and again I do play it.
Gas.
Oh, that's a rogue's passage. I think I might be able to kill you with Hythonia before.
Do it. Do it.
Or
She could tap.
I tap
Hyperion.
one and
What's up?
I can tap Pythonia or I can tap the Rogue's Passage.
In response to that, well, hold on. I don't have a response yet. Do you want to do
Are you
that?
tapping something?
Is the icy? Well, I mean, you can't stop a mana ability. You can't stop a land, so it's on the stack.
Yeah.
She can
I
stop
can
a land.
tap
She
a
can
land.
tap a land.
Right,
Yeah.
but
So I'm just gonna go ahead and
She
tap
can
the rogues.
the Rogue's
proactively.
Passage.
you tap the rogues.
Yep.
You got it.
And I can still tap a creature.
Fuck it. Let's do it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thieving Amalgam.
Pay
Ape
one?
Snake.
Ape snake.
Yeah, pay 1. Fuck you.
Ape snake.
What's that do again?
It steals the top card of our library
I
to make a
really
manifest
wish.
room.
I knew it
Kinda
was
like-
there, and I just didn't have the
It's
mana
really
to do
annoying.
it.
What are you
God
stealing?
damn it. Sorry.
You already stole Hythonia, you motherfucker.
Has nothing to do with that. God damn it.
I like how she's so fancy.
Right?
Ashiok is going to get morphed.
God.
Ashiok morphs over. Tick Ashiok down for 1 to exile everybody's graveyard.
I already pulled everything I
Target
wanted
player
out of
puts
it,
the top
so.
4... Wait. Target player. You put the top 4 into your graveyard, and then everybody exiles their graveyard.
Okay. Soul Ring, land,
Good.
constellation card,
Yeah,
so
it's decent.
and detain. So nothing. I'm
All right,
super.
and then everybody exiles their graveyards.
sad
And
about.
Ashiok's
Oh, crap.
at 4.
Wait, that was you ticked her down 2?
1. She ticks down 1 to...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. Ashiok's ridiculous.
I have a
fucking
It's
call
literally
her.
5 times I get to exile everybody's graveyard in the game, and plus make somebody mill 4. It's obscene.
great.
I
need
I'm gonna swing at you for a 7/9 death touch. On the ground.
nothing else. Just a 7/9.
Sure.
Okay. Take 7.
Okay. Pass turn.
Oh wait, did you pay 2?
Oh, I did not. I can't. I can't pay for it. I cannot pay attack fee. Pass turn.
Well, so
face down
I
creature
hate
in the
to say
battlefield.
this, you're not going to attack Val with Hythonia at 68 life?
Oh, fine. No, I need to block. No, it's all flying. Doesn't matter. Yeah, take 7. Take 8. 4, 7.
Me?
The person with 68. I have 2
Fine.
blockers.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Like,
What are you doing?
I'm hitting you with your own commander for 7.
That time you told me you were gonna kill her.
I can't even attack her. I don't have a mana.
You should say it now.
Oh, by the way, here's your Hythonia death token.
It's your birthday, so I'll be nice.
Honestly, you should be the most evil bitch ever. If you can. Do it.
Hythonia?
Yep. At the beginning of my upkeep, I have to sacrifice Hythonia.
Everybody lose 1.
Did you?
Oh, wait, hold
Play
on.
a spell?
What was the card you drew this turn?
A swamp, and I put it in play.
Draw a different card. I manifest that at the beginning of your turn.
Yep.
Draw another.
Okay.
Have you
It's a
played?
swamp, and I put it into play.
Did you play a spell to make him sacrifice it?
Yes,
I
she
played a
did.
creature.
Play a spell.
Okay. Did you want to pay 1 to prevent me?
Pay
from
1
drawing?
and let her. Don't make her draw a card. Don't let her draw a
I
card.
don't want you to draw a card.
Pay 1 extra. Use the arcane. Because the arcane doesn't tap for 2
What
now.
was the mirror? How much did it
4.
cost? 4?
2 mana.
4. Okay, so that's still 2.
But I mean, if you use that, it's 1. You can't tap that for 2 mana, so you might as well. Okay, alright, shut up now. You might want to make something on hexproof, sure.
I'm paying that, and I'm also making everyone lose a life.
How? Oh, yes. You don't have 2 black permanents.
Oh, I always forget they're not swamps.
Swamps are not black, and lands are not. Lands are colorless.
I was hoping I didn't think.
So you have 9 mana. No, 10 mana.
2, 3, 4.
I forget the Leech Ridden Swamp is a swamp.
It's called swamp.
It's a non-basic. It's a non-basic swamp.
Yeah, because I feel like they normally try to avoid saying the name.
Yeah, well, I guess here.
What
this,
did you play?
Or is it one of the early ones where it was
This is the most annoying card to me in Magic the Gathering.
Never else just was the next thing on top.
Hey, look, it's a 3/4 creature with wings in the painting that doesn't fly.
Oh, yes.
Hey,
terrible.
there's a lot of ground.
That is the most fucking annoying thing to me.
There
in
are
all of
that
Magic.
happened in
There
the
are a lot
early
of
years.
ground spirits.
Ground spirits and ground vampires are fine, but it has wings in the
Because
painting.
the whole thing is that the picture should give you an idea of what the
card
creature does.
Right.
So they try really hard to not put wings in a.
I just love the Petra Sphinx that doesn't fly.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's flying in the picture. It's not like it's a Pegasus on the ground. It's
a ground Pegasi.
Yeah.
I hate it. Fucking vampire face paint.
And I've had confirmed. We've had
I
confirmed
know.
through multiple things that the face paint, the red lines on the it's blood and it's there.
Yeah.
It's
But
like
it's
tribal
not,
shit.
It's like edged and shit.
So
your music.
I don't know if I can do another Commander game after.
We can do
this.
60 after this. It's about 1 o'clock. Yeah, this one's gone a little longer than we expected. They always go long because somebody keeps wiping the board.
How many times have I wiped the board?
Twice.
Legit. I also wiped the board.
Yeah. And I was pretty close to doing it soon too. Like I tutored, but I didn't tutor for what I should have.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just -1.
Me too.
You and turning things up.
Shut it.
So I have to like yell at you guys, and I'm already
I'm sorry.
fucking
What?
loud.
What?
Because we're old.
What?
It's mostly because I have to deal with like a whole shit ton of snot.
I hope you're having a good time. Your first joining us.
It's always a
Which
shit
did not
show.
make my flight home fun.
Oh.
Would you get like 4
hungover.
hours of sleep and hungover, flying home from Dragon Con? 3 hours?
Jesus, that's awful.
Did you get 3 at least? So basically just enough to get rid of the fun part of the drunk and get into the oh, I'm hungover part of the drunk?
Well, and having sinus stuff. Like this year was having an issue. Let me tell you how shitty I felt on that flight. I spent Sunday, I was supposed to be spending Sunday having fun. I spent Sunday recovering.
Well, had I not stopped when I did, I would have been
How
recovering.
many?
Yeah.
How many creatures are out in general right now?
2 on my side.
1.
4.
Oh wow, 1 very big.
What did I mention earlier? It's just gonna kill us with 1 huge honking thing.
I'm done.
Okay.
I tutored.
Beginning of your upkeep, before you draw a card, I manifest that.
What is it?
I'm telling you.
Dang it.
That's the worst part.
I want to know.
Because whatever it is, it's what you need.
Yeah.
Really not.
It's humanity.
If it's still alive. I won't look because it might not still be alive. I'm pretty sure it will be, but...
What?
So I was going to look at the top of her deck because if my thing's still alive, I'm going to manifest the top of that thing too.
Yeah.
Okay.
It almost definitely will be.
The problem is we can't block the flyer.
No.
Huh.
Can't.
And it only has 1 thing on it now, right?
I can block
Nope,
the
it's
flyer.
still
I've
got
got reach.
Oh, right.
No,
Now,
yeah,
granted, it's trample.
No, oh yeah, it does have reach, right?
So reach doesn't go away. Flying
Yep.
goes away.
But I can tap it. I can tap your reacher.
Could. I'm not too worried about that. I have things and stuff.
Things.
But in the meantime, I'm going to play my commander.
Paying 1?
Yes, pay the 1 so she doesn't draw cards.
Fine.
How many cards are you on your hand?
Me? 4.
Good. Let's keep you there or less.
Did I want to pay the 1 though?
Be tired.
Fine, go.
Not ticklish.
I know. Probably. Not
Are you
Gabriel.
ticklish?
Oh wait, no, that goes to you.
All right, that goes to me.
Not ticklish.
Why does it?
Oh, that's delightful. Oh, that makes me so happy.
I know.
I can't play it, but it's delightful. Sorry, I'm going to share with the stream.
I know, it's amazing. I'm very upset, but I'm also very happy.
Yeah.
That he can't play it?
That I can't play it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very happy too.
Wow, it doesn't really.
Hi, friend. What's up?
Hi. I'm tired.
I wish this was on the board
Well, it's nap
earlier.
I saw me
This is gonna be funny.
dozing over there, but it wasn't my full nap.
Because I have, like, for all this shit that I can't play, I have no compunction throwing it at somebody.
I'm a terrible napper.
It's the second game.
Third.
Yeah.
Oh, it is
No,
the second.
it's the second game.
Putting another enchantment down.
Remember that time I said
Drawing
something
2
to Thomas
cards.
Well, I should be able to end this pretty quickly.
He said ominously.
Excuse me.
Putting Beastmaster Ascension down. Drawing 2 cards.
With one creature in play?
Yeah.
The funny thing is, like, we're so concerned with
Wildness
that.
down. Drawing 2
The
cards.
61 is annoying too.
I can't do anything.
I know.
basically don't
That's why you have to,
so-
like, chip it down with
I know.
Tithonia damage. That's the only way you're gonna kill, like,
I know.
or have that life total.
I mean, this game is going to be super grindy because of the deck I'm playing. Well, that deck makes it super grindy too.
Yeah.
God damn it! I'm eating all the meats now.
My God, I'm forgetting.
Ticking her up to 4. Untap.
Birthday meat.
That's why I brought him.
So weird.
All right,
Ascension.
I have received, ladies and gentlemen of the stream,
Birthday meat.
I have received birthday meat and birthday bourbon. Life is fucking good.
That's true.
And birthday cake.
Yeah.
Like,
So-
it's all good.
And birthday bunny ears.
Wait for it. Come on, do it. Oh, I thought you. How about the poop crown? Birthday
Maybe
poop crown.
There we go.
Playing
I was
Kestia
gonna say,
as
why didn't we put the poop
enchantment.
crown on?
Drawing 2 cards. Okay.
So many.
That's all the
Hello,
you
lucky,
done?
thing that I'm
lucky 13 people.
done drawing cards.
Aww.
It's the poop crown birthday. So have you, has everyone seen the
And it's,
Squatty
like,
Potty commercial?
sideways.
Yes.
So Cave Girl and I bought a Squatty Potty, and it comes with a poop crown.
We have
This is the crown you must wear if you are ever the monarch in
Okay.
the game.
That's
Well, and it's got
First.
hashtag poop better,
8.
hashtag
10.
poop like royalty on the side of it.
Right.
16.
Yo, G, what's up?
21.
What's up?
Pay attention to
24.
Oh,
5,
yeah.
6,
God.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
We
12.
let this happen.
I know.
What did you just do?
24. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 4 plus 8 is 32. Who has less than 32?
Everybody,
Yeah.
except for her.
Yeah, except
No.
for her.
You might want to go that way. It's okay. You do your thing.
You do you, boo.
You do you, boo.
Who you gonna get?
I'm gonna kill you next turn. Kill me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's 34
Why would you
flying.
say that?
Next turn, I'm literally gonna take that creature from you
Yeah.
and kill you with it.
Yeah, so that's 34 flying, trample.
This die is good.
Is it
Actually.
lifelink? Is it lifelink? Hold on.
Yeah. And is it all
Well,
like?
it's mine.
Oh, and I get to draw a card. Hold on.
Oh, wait. It's lifelink?
I'm trying
Yeah.
to figure out if it's lifelink. It is not. It is not lifelink.
It
It's
is
not
lifelink. I thought it was.
Hang on.
I'm pretty sure it
No,
was.
my
Don't
other
scoop your
creature.
stuff.
Yeah, okay, I
My
won't scoop
other
anything.
creature was lifelink. This
It's
one is
not
This
lifelink?
one is not
Not
lifelink.
Okay, fine.
Then let me die.
Yeah.
Hold on. What is?
All right. So this swamp goes back to your graveyard. This skin thinner goes back to mine. This
I don't need more people with life.
Forest goes back to your graveyard.
Nice.
And this
extension gets.
And this Thalia goes back to your graveyard.
Oh.
And I am dead.
You chose to die instead of.
There was nothing I could do about it.
Oh.
I had no mana.
DM, you got a question.
You had to.
Oh, what was my question on the stream? What cards letting you Oh, the snake.
It's you.
Dude. The ape
done?
snake.
Are you going?
I'll bring it up. It's the ape snake. It's awesome. It's
yes,
new.
I am done.
Okay,
Thieving
so
Amalgam. I'll bring it up. Hold on.
Wait, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let me discard.
It's awesome. The ape snake.
So discarding the slime and forest.
It's a really cool card. I really enjoy it. I think it's an amazing card, the ape snake. I mean, for 7 mana, plus, like, if you play it in a reanimator deck, you can reanimate it, like, second, third turn, and just start stealing shit from people all game. It's ridiculous.
Oh, wait.
Oh, there's my Strionic Resonator on the bottom of the deck.
Grave Betrayal.
Oh, my fucking... You're gonna... It doesn't matter.
The-
Well, no, you might...
What does that artifact do?
Doubles her mana.
Bubbles her black mana production. I mean, she's already put them on her pool, so
Yeah.
she gets it this turn, but...
Yep.
Hythonia's in play, and a Grave Betrayal is in play.
Which means she'd get
She
everything.
does not have board wipe right now, though.
Okay, untap.
What you got in your hand? Are you top decking? Nah, it sucks.
We're not announcing that to everyone. Could have been cool.
Really?
Yes.
However many cards you have in your hand is... Yeah, you gotta tell the table.
You don't play like that.
Oh. You've heard me ask, like, several times during the game, how many cards you got in your hand.
Yeah.
And look at that. Who did it? It is... I can't even pronounce that. Johann
Voss? Or no, Johann...
Gardner?
It's so tiny. I can't read it.
Gardner. I can't pronounce it.
Oh.
I can't read it either.
Grenier, I think.
Grenier?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a fucking ape snake.
Yeah.
Come on, it's an ape snake.
And he made it look like a plausible creature.
Okay.
That's exactly.
I am paying 2 and cycling the sting shot. Why is... anyway.
Wait, there it is. There it is.
So, I am also, just to note, do I want to pay 1? You know what?
I think you got this. It's ridiculous, but you do.
Fine.
I don't think so right now.
I'm going to
you can
pay
take
1,
one from that
and
pop it down.
everyone lose 2 life, and I gain 2 life.
As long as I do
And
it for stream.
Yeah, the problem is you pop
yeah,
it on
you
you and
skip
you
the
get all the
song.
shit that
For the
does.
song.
That's maybe. I've never gotten us popped for this before.
I am gonna hang out.
Oh yeah, they're gonna crack
That's
on
it?
it more and more.
Yep.
And it is Warner Brothers. Sire Reprise, which is actually now Warner Brothers.
How big is your creature?
Man.
Again.
Oh god, that requires counting.
It's big. It's large.
It's
30.
it changes every time I draw land.
Yeah. What is it? It's chuffed. In the immortal words of our British friends, it's chuffed. So I actually took Frasca out. I think I'm gonna put her back in because she kills a permanent for. You know what I mean? She just comes
Yeah.
in and kills a permanent.
Yeah.
Plus those little
Death
assassins that make you lose the game are pretty
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was happy to see that came in the deck because I was like, oh, I wanted that one.
Like we all forget every time. We all forget how awful Estrid is. We do because people were killing my shit, not
So,
Estrid's
yeah.
shit early in the game.
When she pops off Hyphonia, she gets
All the creature that
everything
dies.
That dies.
It's an enchantment?
Yeah.
Yes. And then, of course, Hyphonia.
What are you doing? You're paying attention to your boy. Aw, so cute.
He's playing Magic right now.
Does he play an MTGO?
Yeah.
Aw.
You can play the new.
Is Eldraine out already?
Yeah, you can play some new cards.
Oh, cool.
Commander format, sort of.
Oh, the Commander stuff's out. Got it.
No, they're like. They're mixed up with other stuff.
Got it. I'm gonna put this in the kitchen because
Eat
if I
it.
leave this out, I'm gonna eat it all.
Eat it all.
No. I'm
Eat
gonna-
it
No.
all.
Shut it. I'm gonna
Eat
put
it all.
Oh my god.
It's
what the hell?
meat.
What the hell,
It's
dude?
birthday meat.
It's birthday meat.
I'm keto. I can say things like that.
See, I'm gonna eat the fucking cake. Fuck you. I'm eating the cake.
Eat both.
I will actually.
4 and 2 white. Bring down Martyr's Bond. Draw 2 cards.
Ah, fuck, I gotta go for 10 of my pool tickets.
Oh no. What did you play?
Just an enchantment so I can draw a
Maybe
card.
at like 9:30
So
after my
anything,
Ticketmaster's ticket works.
whenever any of my non-land permanents die, everybody else has to sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it.
Oh, technically, that creature has a totem on it, so
This is
even
2
if
totems, yeah.
Hythonia goes off, it's not gonna
Yep,
die.
correct.
Or no, because the totem slots off and
One totem falls off, the other totem stays on,
Yeah.
and then I believe all the enchantments stay on as well. I just lose one enchantment.
Off with Hydonia?
Only one.
because she has 2 of them.
Hey, no cake left. Last bit of cake.
Oh,
The cake is done.
No cake left.
No cake left.
No cake to see here.
I have
No
cake.
cake to see here.
Cake or death?
Oh my
So
Yes,
I'm
only choose
going
death now.
to...
Aw, what's going on? You're playing arena and shitting on people with drain stuff. That's unfortunate.
Bant Charm and destroy your mana doubler.
Peanuts on your cake.
Well, I thought they
Is
were
that artifact
I thought they
or
were,
enchantment?
Artifact.
Oh.
I thought they were cashews. Yeah.
What else?
I don't know.
Peanuts are
Did they
good.
what's happening?
Most sugar is a nut delivery system, and when the nuts are gone, the sugar is useless to me. Like
Okay.
ice cream, like you cover it in peanuts, and then when the peanuts are gone, fuck the rest of the ice cream. Who cares? Oh, that's good. Carrot cake with peanuts.
And then I'm going to take her up to 6. No, not take her up to 6. I'm going to take down to 3, actually.
And what are you doing?
You killed yourself in your own doomsday. That's awesome.
Another mask.
That's what doomsday does. It
On
kills
her.
things indiscriminately.
That way it doesn't even kill any of the things if she dies. So.
Wait, look. It's dead cake.
So
Dead cake. Dead cake.
8,
Wait. Dead
I mean, there's dead
cake.
peanuts on there.
10,
Dead cake.
12,
Oh, look, the finger. It even works. Dead cake.
15,
Somebody needs to
20,
clip that. Dead cake.
24,
Dead
Highly
cake.
amusing yourself at the moment.
Dead cake. Dead cake.
24,
Just eat your
Dead
cake.
cake.
17, 18,
Drop it.
30,
Alright,
31.
that's definitely worn off.
Yeah.
What meds?
That's cream cheese icing. No.
It's swing at you for 31 flying.
Me?
Yes.
31 flying, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, there's fucking coconut in there. Motherfucker.
No, there isn't.
I swear to God there is.
It's shredded
You had
carrot.
some
It's the
icing
same
in it.
texture.
So carrot cake?
Maybe, but I'm saying
Like
she had
after.
some of the icing earlier.
I'm
so-
telling you it's coconut.
Okay, if it is, then I'm sorry.
Good luck to me.
Yeah. Do we need a?
DM, you're my favorite Muppet right now. No, I'll be fine.
Do I need like a
No, I just
thing
need-
to
I
stick
can't
into
eat
your
large
heart?
quantities of it. My heart, it goes into the side of your
Yeah.
leg.
Oh.
It's not Pulp Fiction.
No, that's exactly what I'm picturing in my brain. Like you lying on the ground and me like stabbing something in your heart.
right now
Oh,
on
no.
not putting an EpiPen in anyone's heart for any
Oh my
reason.
god.
Yeah.
No, it goes into deep
Do you
muscle.
need an EpiPen?
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
No, I may or may not have eaten some coconut. It's not great, but it's fine.
I'm completely serious. I assumed an heavy pen went right into your heart.
Fine.
What?
Carrot cake shredding.
What are you hitting me with?
31 flying.
What the fuck are we talking
Is it
about?
that stack right there?
Yes.
Okay, what all is
31.
that?
What?
What all is that?
It's 31.
So it's flying. It has base power and toughness.
Well,
8/8.
could have
When it
coconut.
attacks, I can tap something, but nothing else is flying. And then it gets +2 and flying again, and then +2 and untap all my lands. Oops, forgot about that last
That'd be
time.
nice. An Oblivion Strike.
+3 in trample.
I'm dying would just be nice.
+5 in trample. +4 and I draw a card. That's just totem armor again, and then +1 for each card in its controller's hand.
So it's 30 what?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's actually 32 because I forgot I draw a card when I attack. Oh! No. I'll do this later. It's not an instant, so I can't do it right now.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm your favorite Muppet right now. That's usually your favorite Muppet.
It is 32 flying and
NPC.
trample.
It's okay.
You took it? Okay.
I don't know if I'm Bunny's favorite
Did you have a
Muppet.
carrot
I'm
cake?
just
I did.
someone's.
Did you eat carrot cake?
I ate a nail full of the carrot cake icing, which
Yes,
I'm
it
assuming
does
has
have
coconut in
coconut.
it. Yeah.
Yes, it has coconut.
It's the only thing I'm like allergic to, so I know.
I was.
And then
There are still a tiny little bit of my meds left because I was about to go. I'm just like breathe coconut on you because I'm an
I'm
asshole.
not
But you-
allergic to it.
Did it?
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't. It would have been
It
like.
could have been worse.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Like, you weren't as close as you could have been while doing it, but you still did the.
2 and a white, and now I'm giving
We're
it
just at that point.
double strike.
Yeah. Right now, in the
mean-
middle of combat.
No, she took it.
Oh, so you did it as
Yeah.
an instant?
No,
she's-
I just
she took
took
it so
care of
after
this one.
combat.
Oh,
I'm putting
okay.
it because it's not an instant. So,
Got it.
and then I get to draw 2 cards.
Take your turn and do something.
Don't you have to discard at the end?
Yep.
If you're.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Oh my god, this is good. Hey, bro, I love you.
4.
Isn't she trying to sleep?
Yes.
Like she has to work or something tomorrow?
Yes.
Green.
Then stop being a fuckface.
I gotta wake her. I have to wake her up for bed.
And I just put down Mercfiend Liege.
When? When will that be?
So
When you guys leave.
other green
will that
and
be?
blue
That's what I'm
creatures
saying.
get +1/+1
like 3.
each. And then untap all green and or blue creatures you control from each other player's untap step.
So she's gonna untap the
Everything right
giant thing.
Yeah.
That's not gonna die when Hythania
And
goes
then
off.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I have 7, so I don't need to discard.
Helpful.
There you go.
Oh, and it takes up to 2. Because that's super helpful.
Whee!
Do you have any creatures?
I have
One.
1.
It
No, I
doesn't
have
it
2. I have
untap?
2 now.
Wait, doesn't
What's your
it
second
untap?
At her untap,
Yeah.
it untaps. My second one is Mercfiend Liege. So this will die when she board wipes, but
Did
nothing
somebody
else.
kill
will.
your Cage Slim?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. That's game. I think you should probably both resign.
Yeah. I'm fine with that.
I'm curious.
If you
I
guys
don't-
want to start another game.
Yeah, I
And
don't
then I
think
head
there's anything you guys can do to Archfiend of Depravity, she's got 2 creatures. She'll never have more than 1 or 2 to kill us
That's
all.
not the point. The point is it's flying. The block.
No,
No,
it's not because
Are
she
you
has
okay
the.
with
It's the.
Wasn't it?
No, no, no.
Yep, it's got
none of
double
your
strike
stuff
now.
can fly. It's the Archfiend, or it's the
I gave you
Imagination.
everything over there.
It's the one that's
It
has flying.
It's the
None of your
actual
stuff can have
creature
flying.
that can't
Yeah,
die,
yeah,
and it has double strike now.
Yeah.
What else?
I have
don't
a
think there's anything you
fog,
guys can do.
but
Yep.
that only buys me a little
So
bit
are you
of
playing
time.
or are we?
I think that's
Killing.
probably
Let's call it.
Yeah.
why don't you guys review the next reveal the next 2 of each to see what if there's
Okay.
anything that's possible.
Like, I had a fog in hand.
Nope.
First strike and then enchantments
Look,
into my
Oblivion
hand.
Strike is the only thing that could help you. Well, that would have helped you. The Grave Pact would have helped you, but it was 7 down.
Yeah.
Like,
That's what I've done
I had a
before.
fog, so I could have survived.
Yeah, that.
Since
Yeah.
they were duking it out with each other, I was like, I'll just sit here with my fog
I
and
was just fucking sitting here. There was
Estrid's,
no
Estrid's
digging.
awful. Like, the problem is with
There's
Estrid,
been
when you're
a
playing in a
whole game.
4-person game, if the table doesn't gang up and kill Estrid
Yeah.
early, and that person feels picked on and they don't get to play the whole game,
Yeah. Then they feel bad.
but they're gonna win if you don't do that.
Well, as a new player, that wasn't gonna happen.
Yeah, as a new player, we weren't gonna fuck with you like that. But I will
Big surprise
remind
there.
NPC what I said first thing in the game, where she was picking on me, not Estrid.
Hey, I like new people. I was not trying to...
Absolutely, you can. Sorry, Cage Tiki was asking. Yes, that's how you get rid of shit with totem armor. You exile it.
Yes.
That is
Or-
exactly.
Everything I'm playing is enchantments. Just bounce it.
Yeah. And the enchantments all go. The thing gets
DM
bounced.
did that
and
one
everything
Yeah,
goes.
that one
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
But like, Val Smart. Like, there's very few things in Black that exile,
Yeah.
but she keeps an Oblivion Strike in the deck for that reason. Yeah. So, all right. Everybody say thank you and a lovely welcome to Clover. She will be back at some point in the future. We now have more people to, now we have a pool to call on for people to come play with us.
A harem.
And, yeah, a harem.
A whole harem.
Oh, no.
No
That
harems.
is nothing I want any part of.
No harems, just covens.
Orgies,
Yeah.
yes. Harems, no. Anyway.
That's fun.
Jesus Christ, man.
Right there with you.
Um,
Says the vampire.
what are we playing now? We're playing a 60?
what do you
Or
wanna
are we
play?
playing a
I
commander?
would be...
What do you want to play?
If NPC wants to play with us, I think she was saying she wanted to do a 60 because it's late and she's got to get up early.
I know you wanted to try your new commander,
What?
but...
It's up to you guys. I don't care. I'll do whatever you guys decide.
I'll make it where...
I'm not. Oops. I would rather look through that.
Oh,
Well,
your
actually,
new commander.
It's a-
You're no longer a coven. You are Oven Mountain. Why are we Oven Mountain? I have no.
Oh, because the way it crops on Facebook.
Oh yeah, I know. I've heard
Like-
about that. Like yeah, on Facebook we like Oven Mitt. Seriously, like Coven MTG.
I'm
It's like
okay with
Oven
that.
Mitt. Oven MT. Oven
Well-
Mitt.
Oh, what stream do you go on? Oh, Oven Mitt.
Yeah.
If anyone makes a joke about cooking something, making them a sandwich in the kitchen, they're probably gonna get
Man, I've been.
Oh, yeah.
I have tried
All
for.
I want to
wait.
do is be barefoot in the kitchen now.
I have literally
Yeah,
tried
no,
for
it's not
years. I cannot do it, but can you? I can't do. Can you smell what the rock's cooking? I cannot raise the one eyebrow. It's
You can't
awful.
do the eyebrow thing?
I cannot do one eyebrow.
Are you raising?
Todd
Are you
Lacker.
trying the wrong
Can you
eyebrow?
smell what the rock is cooking?
Todd
Oh,
Lacker
yeah,
can.
eyebrow. Yeah.
Todd's really good at that.
Todd was showing off the
So
one
is
with the
Cave
solo
Girl.
eyebrow raise.
Cave Girl's amazing at that.
Yes.
Yes. So anyway,
I can't do it either. So.
I did it way too much in high school. Like that was my thing. Is I just glared at people with the eyebrow raise.
Yeah, nice.
all right. I'm gonna rename properties.
All right, are we playing a 60?
What do you
It's
want
up to you guys.
NPC's deciding.
I vote 60.
Okay.
Jay Brary and Jay Brary up here as well, and down here too. Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna have to get up fucking early.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get up fucking early.
I am
Might even
sleeping
be
till noon.
5.
Yeah, do it.
And hey, I love the fact that it just switches throughout.
Yeah.
It just when I change it on one screen, it usually changes throughout, which is awesome. And
That's very convenient.
when you come back up, let me know. I will walk you out and ask what your experiences were. as we hear the disembodied voice yell, "Okay," from the basement.
Okay. So if we have any new viewers, I'm gonna take
Well,
We have had
trying
a
new
consistent
commanders? Are you
13
kidding me?
viewers almost all night. So thank you for
I
hanging out with
literally
us
just
for
played
hours.
Kadena. I literally just played the Morph Commander.
Nice.
Shout out to you guys for sticking it out for like literally hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has anyone been only watching like in the past hour? Is new to us? Is there?
Aw, it's a little bad dice.
Yes.
All right, this is the last piece of my birthday cake. By the way, for those who weren't watching earlier, it's my birthday tonight, so I'm eating the last little piece of my birthday. At midnight, it was my birthday.
Yes.
I
The
appreciate your
song.
commitment, Captain Harris.
What are we playing? 60?
Yep.
All right.
Well, if anyone doesn't know about our Patreon, we have new rewards on there. You should check them out.
Woo!
I won't go into the spiel, but we have new rewards on there. You should check them out if you want to get some really cool stuff
We are
that we've
new
been
to
collecting
Patreon,
to give away.
So your suggestions would be awesome as well.
Yes, there is a place on there to make suggestions for us.
On the actual page?
Yeah, I think I did post a, hey, we've updated our tiers. If there's something you want to see, like in
Yeah.
the highest reward level, let us know.
Awesome.
Leave a comment.
Upside down, I'm going to ask the stream Are you sure? The stream, the question is Orzhov or Jeskai?
I don't ever let him play Warzone though.
That's what you picked.
No, this is what I picked. I put
Oh.
this one towards you and shoved that one away.
Oh. So you
That one looks more
You shoved
ominous
away the
to
one
me.
that I actually put the Orzhov little sticker on.
This one looks like
Yes,
dragons and dragons.
Oh, no.
Rad Rage, I think.
No.
I mean, do you want
It's Bunny.
I'll
Could
go
we-
last.
Bunny? Do we want to do
I'm gonna pull you aside for 30
maybe
seconds before
a
you go.
Whore Island T-shirt for the
Nice.
highest tier level of
Can we
rewards?
even do that?
I mean,
I don't know. Maybe we can.
We wouldn't have to like say the words in writing. We could have a picture of it that the picture says it.
But the picture might get flagged as offensive.
Maybe you'll just get a
though.
map before Island. For
Oh
shits and
yes.
We'll just say it's a map of the island. If you don't know what the island is, PM us a message. We'll explain the island.
Yes. It's like,
I don't know
please
if we
watch
should
us
even
and then
take
you'll
this.
know more.
giggles. Not that far.
It would be kind of funny though.
I think it's funny.
I think it's funny.
I don't know. Tell us what you all want. Within reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean, Bunny created these amazing things. I think we should use them
The map is
because
cool as
it's
fuck.
really freaking amazing, and I think our followers who know of it will be amused and entertained by it.
Yeah, use my map. That sounds really dirty,
Yeah.
out of context, with like no vocal tone in it.
Mm.
Just saying. Just saying.
I only brought 160, so
Sorry.
See how it goes. I have two.
good one. I
just
hope. I
pulled
think.
the first one out of my bag that came up.
I'm so sleepy.
Aw, she had a good time, yay.
Yay.
Just making sure we didn't like scare her
can't
away on the
have
first time visiting
Good
us.
time at the coven.
Yeah.
Which is
She was
ridiculous.
trapped next to me.
I literally just want to make sure that we didn't scare the shit out of the person who came to visit us for the first time.
I mean,
Oh wow.
God
We
kids is
might
the
have.
problem.
We might. Alright. I died first. I get to go first.
You sacrificed yourself first, thank
No,
you.
I didn't. I was just playing like an asshat.
Yes.
Plus, you know, I did manage to win the first game by killing her with a flashback doubled Devil's Play, which was pretty cool.
Putting fisting o'clock on the t-shirt would be a little awkward for whoever.
I don't know. Man. I would put
Maybe.
fisting o'clock on a t-shirt.
That's
Yeah, you can wear that as promotion at the next Dragon Con.
Okay.
I ain't.
I will happily wear a.
You should get one of the rubber fists and walk around and just
Oh,
tell people
right.
it's 5 o'clock and then you have to ask about the coven. Not that that's the greatest intro to
Oh, your mom is available. Like in
How
fact,
did you get out?
She's an idiot. A cat. I love her.
You love to hate that cat.
I really do. I need a.
But he was the one who was
I
like,
need a white mono.
I know this white creature that might
Might
appreciate.
go with that. Fine, whatever. All right, I'm first.
Yeah.
Red, Pest turn.
Wait, can I actually?
What do we think of Throne? The artwork is amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
That's like
the mechan-
even if the cards are atrocious, it'd be like the artwork is just.
We haven't seen enough of the cards to make a judgment yet. I
So-
mean, how much of it's been spoiled? Like
So
15 cards or 20 cards?
So I did a thing
What'd you
while
do?
y'all were playing.
What'd you do?
I bought a sketch from the new set from
What'd you
Chris
get?
Seaman.
Your turn.
Chris is awesome.
You have to share. With
So
what
he's
it
at
is.
Origins
Now I'm
every year. If you
curious.
come with us next year, like we'll introduce you. He comes out to dinner with us every we do a really nice steak dinner, and Chris likes to do that with us.
I played an island go. I don't know if you can bring up the card if it is even.
I don't know. Let's see.
Have to see
No,
if
it's not in Scryfall yet. If
Yeah.
it's,
Okay, you'd have to look it up, I guess, and see if you can move it around on the screen. But
just tell us about it.
the card is. Hold on, let me open my messenger.
Am I up again? I'm up again.
You're up again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play a Skycloud Expanse. I'm gonna tap that to make a blue and a white, and play an Elusive Spellfist. I'll
What does
bring it
that
up.
do?
It is a 1/3 human monk.
Oh,
Yeah.
that deck.
What is it?
Cool art. So he's a little human monk, and he has 1/3. And whenever I cast a non-creature spell, he gets +1 and unblockable.
That's
I remember
terrible.
this deck.
It's a prowess deck.
What is that?
Prowess?
Yes.
Let me see.
When you cast a spell, things happen.
That does
Usually
not
creatures
sound
get
good.
bigger.
It's that sketch.
Oh, nice.
Prowess. Whenever you
That's
cast a
awesome.
non-creature spell, this creature gets
Huh?
+1/+1 until end of turn.
Good.
Yes.
Wait, is that what you bought?
A sketch.
Oh, that's pretty
sketch.
sexy. The sketch.
Yeah.
Again.
Awesome.
All right,
That's really
you're
cool.
up. By the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you got sun, like you have freckles and shit. Like you actually got sunshine. You were out under the Daystar.
The Daystar is angry. There hasn't even been a Daystar. We live in the gloomy.
We do kind of live in the gloomy.
I mean,
That
not
actually
wearing
makes it
foundation.
worse.
What?
Like,
yeah, because
the
you don't think you're out
sun.
on. Well, you don't actually think you're out under daylight, and you're like it's gloomy, but oh shit,
I
I'm
still
getting
remember.
I'm getting
still
fucking
remember.
sunlight.
What you do?
Jake, are the deck lists for Brawl out yet? The Brawl deck list?
Yeah,
Decks?
we're gonna have to buy all the brawls because there's a whole bunch of really cool cards in the brawl decks that aren't in
Yeah.
the regular.
I've been
Yeah.
watching him play this, and like the art in every fucking card is just.
They're
beautiful.
sexy. They're
Go.
super sexy.
I'm
I
holding
can't
my
believe-
favorite Magic art in my hand.
Aww.
Watch me.
So I'm dead serious. Is how do we do? We do art / artist.
Remember. Wasn't it like semicolon?
No, it's like artist :
Nope.
I think it's, you don't put a space in between the name and the colon.
Nope.
Okay.
You spelled
Go
right
to
two different
syntax. Go to
times
syntax. Look up syntax.
There we
Ah,
go.
there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, the problem is it's Omar Ryan, and no, it's not. It's not out yet. I can't look at any of the Eldraine cards.
We can't usually.
Okay.
I do not Daystar well.
6, 7.
So that's really interesting the way that the Eldrazi
Alright,
and
pass.
the thing work together, like those two playmats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pass turn.
I'm up.
See,
Yep.
like the wings
Ah.
go into the peak.
Play a City of Brass. I lose a life every time I tap it, but I can tap it for any color mana. Blue, white, red. Jeskai Ascendancy.
And you lose a life.
I lose a life. 19. And the Jeskai Ascendancy is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, all creatures you control get +1/+1 and untap those creatures.
Okay, but is that a creature?
Nope.
Oh.
And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may draw a card and discard a card. Pass turn.
What is it?
I could hit somebody for 2, but I'm not going to.
Excuse me.
Did you fart?
No.
Oh.
I heard.
Aw.
Did she get locked out of the bedroom or
That
something?
No.
like
No, she just literally wants attention. There's somebody up and awake.
Separation anxiety cat.
I am going to tap
She should
3
do it like 2 times. She
and
stops.
play a silver
Dog
for
fart.
partisan.
I'm gonna have to do something about that because I want Gabriel to be able to sleep. Because she has
Happy
work in
kitty.
the morning.
But is K-Girl actually in the bedroom?
Well, I don't know where she is.
Like,
Whenever a wolf or werewolf controls one target instant or sorcery spell. Whenever a wolf or werewolf you
Token.
control. Ouch. That's a problem. That's bad. My turn?
yeah. Just don't target my stuff.
Well, if I kill that first, then you won't get to the other stuff when I target your other wolves.
Yeah,
Am
but
I right?
it's a wolf.
Yeah, but
So
you only
I
get
get
one.
one.
You
Okay.
get one, but you won't get many.
Cave Girl's sad about it, but like last night, and we hadn't had to do it before with this cat, but since she's got a real full-time job now and she leaves the house all day, we have instituted the water bottle.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's the water bottle?
If the cat's
Spraying a cat.
whining and we can't sleep, it gets sprayed with water.
Aww.
That would not work on my cats.
It's basically, it's like you whine, you get sprayed with the water bottle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the nicest way
It is the nicest way to like
deal with an animal.
Yeah.
Lava coil. Get your wolf.
I did that with my cats when they were younger, and they understand everything now. Like Saki even
Yeah,
understands.
that needed to die.
Yeah.
That needed to die very quickly.
Oh, and it gets exiled. I think.
Right? If it dies.
Yeah, if it dies, it gets exiled instead.
Oh my
That's
fucking
fine.
Christ! Are you playing the fucking is it shit? Oh, that's not good. Oh, that's not good at all.
Past turn.
Worried about that?
Call it out.
It's the only one I brought. It's not my fault.
I mean, it
could've
clearly
played
was
Commander.
the correct one if it's making him have that
I know,
reaction.
right? I'm gonna play a Seeker of the Way. It is a 2/2 creature. Seeker of the Way, 2/2 creature, prowess. When it attacks, it has a lifelink. Best turn.
Excuse me.
Yeah, good.
Child of night.
Child of Night. Vampire lifelink. Got it. Dog fart. Who the hell asked? It was a while ago. 140, so like 3 minutes ago. Dog fart?
It
What?
was a while ago.
What the hell was dog fart about?
You
I don't
missed
know.
it.
Are you done?
Yes, I'm done.
Alright, whatever.
Well, I like how he's like, "Did you fart?" And then I was like, "No, I burped." Oh.
Aww.
So it's like
Either
the
one.
fart is.
I'm almost. I'm basically. You would have gotten an all for either of those things.
It's okay.
Like they're late gentlemen.
Weird humans.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, no matter who's watching,
Human
whatever.
beings.
Yeah,
watching
yeah,
us.
like whatever your orientation is, whatever your
I'm
actual
tapping
gender
forward
is.
to play a growing ranks.
The day your significant other farts in front of you is one of the happy days in the universe. You're like, oh, you're comfortable enough
And
to
now I'm
fart.
done.
Jake does
Okay.
that to me all the time. I called out.
But I'm dead serious. Trust me on that one.
So you look at my enchantment. He also has one that.
That's
draw
that's way
prowess.
worse.
What's the enchantment you have out there?
It's
This
a
deck's
prowess
gonna be a
enchantment,
problem.
and whenever I play a non-creature, I draw and discard. However, that thing makes a copy of a token every
I know.
turn.
I
Yeah.
know. Didn't have the mana
Jesus.
open. Didn't have the mana open to do anything with it.
Jesus! What are you doing, Jesus?
That's the kind of
Oh my
relationship we
God.
have.
Oh my god.
Called the fuck out.
I'm highly amused.
Like, not even
Wow.
sorry.
It's usually this one. Because he tries to make everyone else to be the enemy.
I'm just gonna play my little Enigma
That's so
Drake.
funny.
Oh,
It's a
that
dragon. and it's
my little Enigma Drake.
It's a
Well,
1/4.
So you want to know
Right
what's
now.
highly amusing? I built this deck too, and hey,
Is it better than mine? Probably.
it's about the same. And hey, look, I put Enigma Drakes in it.
Four
Yeah.
of them?
No, 2,
Ah.
because I wanted the cracklings.
Okay. It's actually your turn.
Oh, is it
So
really?
could
There's
you
the
take
Enigma
it?
Drakes.
Yep.
Like,
I
Fine.
you didn't have to show
fuckers.
me. I figured it would be a
Every
given,
turn is your
because,
turn.
you
You're
know.
missing it. Come on.
my
Wait for instance
God.
some
Makes
gameplay.
Really? Seriously?
No, I had to go one off. Like I never get to
Called
see
the
that, too.
fuck out. Who was called out? Me or DM?
I called Jake
Probably
out.
me.
I'm gonna play Shuyun, the Silent Tempest, past turn.
what does that do?
What does that do? Oh, of course.
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Again, my, like, yes, the wolves can get out of control, but
But
your board state is a little more intimidating than mine right
I
now.
missed a land drop, 2 of them.
That's not good.
Switch of you. I don't have the thing in front of me.
It doesn't work anyway. I need another. I need to fix the USB driver.
I need more mana. I sit.
Okay.
But yeah, like, so just out of curiosity, everything looks good and sounds good for all the
Alright.
people watching and listening tonight. Yes.
When I was watching on Twitch, and Facebook was better because
Facebook's
usually
always
looks
better.
better,
Yeah,
but
no.
like I would say the quality watching on Twitch was less this
So-
time around, and I feel like it was the Wi-Fi or something.
No, it doesn't.
No.
You watched it on 2 different things on the same Wi-Fi, so your speed was.
I did.
Yeah, your speed was the same. what that shows you is that Facebook is gorgeous. Facebook spends a lot of money on making sure the video is not compressed to hell. Twitch compresses the shit out of our video.
Oh, okay.
That's funny because Facebook presses the absolute fuck out of personal videos, though.
Yeah, but I mean, Facebook, for live streaming stuff, Facebook is absolutely the most gorgeous place to watch it. Good night, Bunny. See you tomorrow.
Good night, Bunny.
How many cards do people have in hand?
5.
5.
6.
It's probably the
6.
Wolf Howler's Call.
What
Or
is it?
Wolf Caller's Howl.
Wolf Caller's
Wow.
Close enough. Close enough.
Yeah, no, it wasn't close at all. It was not close in any way.
It had the words there. They were just...
Wolf Howler's Call?
No. Wolf Caller's Howl. Like,
Is
no.
Wolf Caller one word?
Yes. Like, that one.
At the beginning of your upkeep, create X is the number of opponents with 4 or more cards. There you go.
Yep.
And go.
I like the angle of that card.
What's that?
I like the angle of that card.
It's Ralph Horsley.
Yeah.
Ralph's the one who talked about gelatinous cubes in the movie.
Yep.
Get it? And I love how
What
British
movie
people
is
say
that and where can you find it?
it's called Eye of the Beholder: The Art of Dungeons and Dragons, and my wife and I made it, and it's awesome, and it's on Amazon.
It's on like every streaming platform, right?
It's on Amazon Prime. I should stop telling people that because it's free on Amazon Prime.
Yes.
But also, if you have Amazon Prime, you can sub to our channel for free. Free for you. It makes us money. That's how you can even it out.
Do you have flying, Dan?
Nope. But there will be retaliation.
Of course there
What
will.
else? He likes being arch enemy.
It's not arch enemy. I'm literally saying, don't attack me, or I will unload both shotgun barrels.
Me and creature, you're gonna attack me.
They've made multiple movies. Switch the view.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you can watch all of the movies.
Yeah, they're both actually on Amazon Prime. So the one literally on the wall behind me is of Dice and Men and is also on Amazon Prime.
So how big are the things you have over there? And you can give them double strike?
Yeah, but it's not about that. It's about me literally being able to +1, +1, +1, +1. So they're all going to be +5 in double strike. So leave me alone.
You played a leave me alone deck.
I did. You don't know what it does. You'll see what it does.
So, you can only give one creature double strike by paying the mana.
Oh, anytime I cast an instant or sorcery.
Yes, but
I only have enough to do one right now.
Yeah,
That's correct.
like-
that is absolutely correct.
And
right now.
sure, you might
Right
get
now.
a 4, yeah.
Stop. You gotta stop doing that. You're
No,
being really
oh,
loud.
oh, no,
I
no,
keep doing it back to you.
I
wife is
understand that. I do this when I'm sitting here playing a video game too.
Okay, but
Anyways,
if you
Magic Cat.
torment the cat, who you say shouldn't be doing the meowing at this hour, and
I like
then
how we
spray
keep
it with
doing
the
it,
bottle,
No, I
like,
mean,
that's kind of...
it's what I do when I'm sitting on the couch, so it usually stops her from doing it. She's like, "What the fuck's going on? Why are you doing that?"
And Ash will just like keep talking back to me.
I moved to combat,
To
and I
hit
hit
you
you
if
with
you
one. For one.
For one, I
For
take
one.
one.
I pass turn.
You have no blockers.
I don't.
Okay, cool.
But I have a lot of untapped mana.
It's all good.
Okay.
Murder! Not murder in that deck, of course.
Yeah.
but
Island. In the
Other,
day.
other fun things, like lava.
Yeah.
Lots of lava.
Um,
Murder!
I'm gonna tap 1 for an Artful Dodge.
What is that? Is it instant or sorcery?
It's an instant or sorcery.
What does it do?
It makes target creature unblockable this turn.
Well, are you gonna throw it at someone else?
I'm just casting the spell. I have not declared attacks yet. Hi,
Alright.
Cat. She's literally staring at the stairs, about to decide if she wants to go up or down.
Pay 2 or spell pierce.
I think she's gonna...
I will happily let it has flashback. It will go to my graveyard.
Okay.
I, however, did cast it,
Okay.
so I will draw a card and discard a card.
Okay.
Uh,
Are you gonna pay? So it got countered. You're not
it,
gonna pay
it
this
got
turn?
countered.
Okay.
Nope. Not doing whatever. Drawing a card, discard a card. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Believe it or not, I'm gonna discard a fucking Boros Charm. Then I'm gonna tap that. for 1, and I'm going to cast a Distortion Strike.
What is that?
Give target creature +1 and unblockable until the end of turn.
Okay.
I
know you're forcing him.
I'm not forcing him. Like, you don't have to do it. I might not swing at you.
Spell Pierce.
Spell Pierce? Sure, it's going to rebound at the end of the turn.
Okay.
Or it's going to rebound next turn. There it goes. Pass turn? Well, hold on. I'm going to discard. So all of my creatures, I've cast 2 spells. All of my creatures get +2/+2. I'm going to swing at you for 4. Lifelink.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
You done?
And go to 22 and pass turn. Like, I really actually wasn't going to attack you with everything, but...
I can't know that.
You don't know. I actually could have killed... If it was a one-on-one game, I could have killed somebody right now.
I know.
Yeah. Go ahead, you're up.
What happened?
No, he attacked me with a 4/4.
And Jayberry spell pierced 2 of my spells.
Wow.
Demon.
And you want a demon token?
No.
Do you have one? Oh, your Coven MTG card is your demon token.
Yeah.
That's awesome. At least it's not a fucking...
Did you show off the 5/5 Kelly?
No, I didn't actually. Hang on, let me pull it.
Not.
I'll pull it up. Cave Girl.
Cave Girl.
What does
Doesn't
the
matter.
demon
Rick
do?
was using
Wrong
my
name.
Rick was using my real name like for half an hour earlier. Oh, and actually, you guys haven't all seen it yet.
Yeah.
So this is the Jason Engel. On the back of Jason Engel's Font of Agonies, he made for me a Cave Girl 5/5 flying demon token. So I have a whole collection of these.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that one a
Yeah,
lot.
check it out.
Okay.
You're up, by the way. Oh, yeah. Is NPC up?
I am done.
Isn't that cool?
How many
Yeah,
cards?
That's really cool.
So Todd Lockwood, I paid for Todd to do one. He's gonna email it. He's gonna mail it to us. So Todd's. I'm gonna have a Todd.
Who has 4
Kelly
more
demon.
cards?
I do not.
You. Yeah.
Nope.
4. Just 4.
4 or more. So you're
So
gonna draw
get
2 cards,
2
or you get
wolves.
2 wolves.
2 wolves.
Technically I get 3. Because at the beginning, put
A copy.
a copy.
So you're gonna get 3 wolves.
Total of 3.
Yeah, because I'm the fucking enemy.
I just wanted. You know what I want in my graveyard.
I know,
right?
you want instants and sorcerers in
I
your
want
graveyard.
instant sorceries in my graveyard. Otherwise, this deck doesn't work.
Holy shit! Did you actually have that shirt printed for the stream?
What?
Oh, what?
Look at your shirt.
It's an
No.
image comic strip.
Oh, I actually thought it said Jayberry.
Image Comics.
I thought it said
t-shirt.
Jaybrarian.
No.
You shouldn't get a Jaybrarian shirt.
No.
Just
No.
deadpan, like, no.
No, fuck you. Fuck you no. Fuck you no.
That's really funny.
You can get me one.
Sure.
We should do a little shirt run.
Well, NPC already has their shirt.
Yes.
Yes. You know, we need to do that. So, literally, you need to get that shirt, because then I have a DM, you have a Jayberry, you have an NPC, and you need to get a Val
I
shirt.
want one that says, ask me about my coven.
Do you have... You need to go get yourself... I submit
go
to you, you
ahead.
could probably get it for like $10 somewhere.
Probably.
A shirt that says
At the end
Valoran,
of-
ask me about my coven.
At the end
And
of
we'll
your
all wear
turn,
Yes.
I'm gonna tap 2.
I get custom stuff made on
Tap
Etsy all the
one.
time for super cheap.
For an opt.
Yep, draw a card.
No, scry.
It
then
is, it's
draw a
awesome,
card.
NPC.
I like it.
Yeah, I'll keep
Now
it
that we
there.
see you, we're like, man, maybe I should have
Untap.
got you the small.
Upkeep. Oh, wait.
But like, it really did. It looked like a
They
teeny
need
tiny...
tit windows, right?
Everyone's shirt needs a tit... I'll wear a tit window shirt.
Jesus, please, no.
Thank you for that.
Straight into the gutter.
That was, I had nothing to do
Jesus,
with that.
please, no. It was like, oh god.
I don't want any.
Only so if you wear a tit window shirt, I'm gonna behave like one of the conures and start pulling out chest hairs, like one by one.
Yeah.
Can I zoom in on your board and see what's there?
We don't have it. The best we have tonight is this.
Oh, okay.
I feel like Jay could wear one.
So here's what we got, right?
Yeah.
I've got lands back here.
Okay.
I have an Elusive Spellfist, which is a 1/3 prowess.
Okay.
I've got a 2/2 life prowess that's lifelink when it attacks.
Okay.
And I've got a 3/2 prowess that can give something double strike.
Okay.
And Jeskai Ascendancy is whenever I cast a non-creature spell, I can draw a card, discard a card, and all of my creatures get +1/+1, and I untap them.
Okay. And what? And Child of Night, and what's that?
2/1 lifelink.
Priest of the Blood Right.
2/2 that makes her lose 3 life every turn.
2 life.
2 life every turn. Because when it came in, it made a 5/5 flying demon.
Okay. And a bunch of wolves. Okay.
What's NPC mean? Non-player character. Did you not know that? It means non-player character. NPC. Yeah. And what are your dialogue choices on your shirt? So normally when you're playing an NPC video game, right?
My brother had a good point that I'm gonna end up breaking someone's wrist because I swear to goodness, if you touch me, I will cut you. Because it says, please choose one.
Oh, and people like poke.
But it says, I've finished
my quest.
Heard any rumors?
Got anything for sale?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, NPC is non-player character. However, NPC is a player character because she's like, part of the group.
She's our chaos, our resident
resident chaos Muppet. I don't know. I'm giving you a run for your money with some of the bullshit I've been putting together lately.
Terramander.
Oh, I'm gonna pull that up because people don't know how awful and amazing that card is.
Yeah, you figured it out.
PTERA.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I've seen this be played before.
People don't realize, like, literally, you can play it for 1, and then the next turn turn it into a 5/5 creature. Or even immediately if you've got 2 blue mana.
Blue doesn't feel good since she's at home.
Aw, yeah, we feel bad for Blue.
Oh, Blue. Oh, is Blue on?
No, but someone was asking.
Okay. Alright, so I played my Terramander. I'm going to give it +1/+1 and haste.
You got it.
So I am going to move to combat. I'm going to target NPC.
Thank you. Like, you missed it. You're looking at your cards, and we're all just sitting here going like this. I am.
I mean, NPC could have a fog. So.
How many wolves are on the playing field over there?
A lot.
4.
4.
So.
8 damage worth of wolves.
A 5/4 and a 2/2 flying.
We've got a core group of 4 people
6
playing
damage
every week, but we've got I don't know, 10 people or so in the general.
Yeah, I mean it's we 4 and Blue that are the core 5, and then we've got Gothsox, we've got Ninja, we've got Clover now.
Draw 2 cards.
So that's 3 extra. Who else is kind of?
Well, we play with different people at game nights and whatnot, and we haven't really spoken to anybody all that.
I'm not playing land this turn. I play land.
But
always the 4.
But if you identify as a woman and you are interested in playing with us, by all means,
hit us up on the Facebook.
Hit us up.
And I pass my turn.
All right, untap. Upkeep. During my upkeep, Distortion Strike flashes back, rebounds.
P.S. It's not because we don't like the men folk. We are trying to be like, hey, there are ladies that play Magic. Which is why we were mostly rotating.
Seeker of the Way has +1/+1 until end of turn.
We just want ladies to know that there are other ladies they can play with if they want to learn or hang out or whatever. And we have game nights and play with dudes all the time. So
5.
It's definitely not an exclusive group.
All right.
There's also a lady planeswalker society around.
I am not going to give it double strike.
Magic. We encourage women to play Magic.
I'm going to play Narset, Enlightened Master.
What does that one do?
I'm going to pull that up because you're going to want to know about that. Oh, come on. Narn. N-A-R-S.
Not Marset.
Yes.
That. Is that what's sexy? Alright.
Okay, doesn't have haste.
Nope. No haste. However, this thing is 5 unblockable. I'm not going to fuck with you again.
So, it said non-creature, though.
Yeah. This thing, this rebounded, so I cast a spell.
Okay. That's fine.
So I'm going to swing at you for 5 lifelink, unblockable.
5 lifelink, unblockable.
I am not giving it double strike. 5 linking unblockable.
I see that card. I'm curious.
This one?
This one. Yeah.
It has lifelink when it attacks.
Okay.
So it got +2 two instant spells were two non-creature spells were cast. Plus this gives it +1.
Two non.
Sorry, one was cast. This gives it +1.
Okay.
Prowess gives it +1. This gives it +1. Because it actually says it gives it +1.
And what gives it unblockable?
Distortion Strike is +1 unblockable.
Okay. I'd like to know what's happening to it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's this deck is ridiculous.
There's too many things happening.
Wait, that doesn't go to my graveyard.
Yeah.
There, hitting you for 5.
Guess I'm gonna have to take it. That
Right.
sucks.
Pass turn. Lose your 2. I gotcha.
Thank you.
Whatever happens, don't kill that.
Don't think we have much of a choice.
Watch too. Like I'm gonna attack with this next turn. It's gonna be 4 lands.
Switch the view. Switch the view.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anybody have flying?
Nope. Well, she does, but it's
They're
tapped.
tapped. So, I'm open. Fear my one island. Fear it.
I'm
Fear my
scared
one
of
untapped
the
island.
blue
I'm
mana.
literally
I got.
going back to the beginning of the song so I could hear the whole thing louder.
I do that in the car.
I know. Like when you're not paying attention, you're like, oh, I like this song.
Yeah.
No, let's listen to the whole thing.
All the time.
All right, it's your turn, right? I'm gonna go make soda stream. When you hear the weird sounds coming from the kitchen, it's me making a soda.
I bought a soda stream.
I know, you
Last
told me.
week.
And it's not killing the dogs, right?
No, yeah, the dog doesn't like
It
the
was
soda.
funny, Jake was like, yeah, we want to make sure it wasn't with the dogs.
We googled it to make sure it was safer.
Like this.
That made me a demon when it came in.
It's a 5/5 flying demon, but it's like this 2/2 is doing 2 damage to your
Every turn.
Yeah.
Let's go this way. Let's arch enemy. Shit.
There's a lot of bad things
I want to go
everywhere.
home and lay down. I am the tired.
Are we making an arch enemy?
I don't know. You punched me pretty fucking good. Like, I'm still a little saucy about that.
Legit. I know.
Punching me pretty good.
Legit. Hey, I didn't punch you alone. Someone else punched
I
you
didn't
after it.
punch you alone.
Yeah.
Not
So you
I
sounds
got
like the coven.
They got real dark real fast.
I know, I appreciate that. I appreciate how dark they got that fast. Some quality streaming. This is why you guys watch us.
In fact, I'm probably gonna toss this
What?
veggie stuff. This
I'll eat it, put it in the fridge.
Spider
Breakfast.
bones.
I'm like, I'll eat it, put it in the fridge. Breakfast.
I mean, it's pretty tasty in my opinion, but I just don't have it in me.
That's what she said. I'll put it in.
Oh, shut it.
Okay, kidney punch time.
Aw, please don't punch me in the kidney. Pretend to punch me. Okay, thank
It's a
you.
birthday kidney punch. You have to accept it.
It's a birthday kidney
Didn't
punch.
hurt you.
Narset's,
Only poked.
yeah, Narset's ridiculous if it lives.
Any flyers?
Nope.
Hit him.
You really want to do that?
Yep.
Is my character there right now?
No.
I have to.
No.
I want to go home.
Oh, well, then
So-
hit me.
2:05.
Hit him.
Hit somebody. Hit somebody.
Now that she has a boyfriend, she actually wants to get home now.
I'm just tired from like the move too.
So you say.
I said 2. Like also.
Is it all coming at me?
Yes.
Alright, I'm going to kill that. You don't get no life because it's first strike. Did. I will take 7 damage. Go to 0. Or 20.
Go to 0.
Sorry.
I wish.
I will go to 20.
0.
You done?
No blockers, huh?
Yeah. I'm fine. I'm good.
But
Done.
she has murder mana open.
She does.
Like, okay, how many cards in hand?
I submit to you she would have killed something. 2 cards. I have no mana, so I'm like just hanging out.
How many cards? 3. How many cards? Enough.
4. 5.
Okay. So 2 wolves.
No, nobody's got. You get 1 wolf. Oh, you populate and get 1. Yep. god, that fucking card. I gotta figure out what we're not. Well, there's two channels we're not actually streaming on. I'm curious. So we're on. There's 12 people on
We should
Twitch.
be off Facebook, yeah.
No, Facebook's forever now. They don't do the 4 hour
It's the
thing
2 battle
anymore.
ones. What is that? I don't even know what channel that is.
I don't know. I think it's LinkedIn.
I think it's Mixer.
Oh yeah, Mix.
Except
MX.
I'm not going to win this. Anyways,
Which is fine, 'cause that
pass
doesn't
turn.
matter.
Yeah, but we've still got somebody on Facebook. Hi, Facebook person.
Hello.
We got all the core things.
Yeah.
Mixer's not a big deal.
I have no idea how to get out of that. There we go.
Ooh, jeez.
Draw.
Siberia.
Yeah, I should put this on the playlist.
It's one of my favorite
I
songs.
just forgot about it.
I think that this is one of the best stoner songs in the history of stoner songs.
I have a whole playlist full of that shit.
Power and toughness. What do
Orbital.
you have on the board?
3-2, 3-2, 1-3. These two are first strike. No, sorry, this one's first strike. This one's potentially double strike.
Okay.
Wait, which one had first strike?
Narset.
Okay.
She's first strike and hexproof.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, if you can do 2 damage to all creatures, you wipe everybody's board. Except for the demon.
I mean, to each creature.
Yeah.
No. Let's see. Shock the first 2-1. The power 2. Or toughness 2. Sorry. Shock it.
Shuyan or the lifelinker?
Shuyan.
Shuyan's dead.
Shock the next toughness 2. Yep. If that's the only one.
Are you literally literally you're leaving the wolf army at like 12 damage of wolves and taking this out?
Are you gonna throw it at him? If I get rid of his creatures? Okay.
But she's gonna throw it at you next.
That's fine.
She has answers.
can try.
I'm sure.
All right,
Bedtime.
I can also
She also has flight.
What?
I can
Whatever.
also one-shot kill her with flying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Whatever.
So,
Hopefully I can one-shot kill you next turn too.
all right. Well, you could try.
I'm absolutely going to now. Like, there's no doubt about it.
It's fun, cage cheating.
Yeah.
This is
Like, there's literally no doubt about the fact that I'm gonna try to
normal
one-shot
for
kill
us.
you next turn.
Do you have any? Can you block flying?
Nope.
All right, then you're dead.
How am I dead? I'm at 20.
Maybe. You're
Do
at
it.
20?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Lifelink.
That's not the one that counts all the count things.
These wolves are
That's not the
very-
crackling,
I'm
that's the other
upset.
So its power is equal to the number of instant sorcery cards in my
Oh, sure.
graveyard.
Do we maybe
Yeah,
need to
so
promise
it
you a
is.
bear deck
Okay.
at some point? Because that's an alright promise for the coven to make.
It's 8. Sure, I'll take 8.
Well, I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
I'll take 13.
She has plans and stuff and things.
Is there a way to make a bear 60?
Yeah, plenty of them.
'Cause I don't know much about bear cards.
Oh.
Just know mana cards.
It's the new Queen Bear makes like things bears.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
I
like
saw the art, but I haven't read it.
and
What other
changelings.
creatures do you have out there?
Like you
Ooh,
might,
changeling.
if you don't save a blocker, you might be dead on my
Alright,
turn.
bears.
I'm dead
From
serious.
you?
You know
Yeah,
what?
from
if
me.
If we're dead on this turn,
What?
then it's 2:30 and I go
It's
home.
not, no, from me. Like, not from anybody else.
What creatures are out there? What do you have
I have
left?
a 3/2 that's going to let me put 4 into exile and play every instant or sorcery that's put into exile.
Okay. Or I can kill it and it won't.
It's hexproof.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
All
it's
right,
hexproof
what's
and first
next?
strike. And this is a 1/3 creature
Okay.
that has unblockable and +1 for every instant and sorcery I play. Actually, +2 because of that.
Okay.
So everything that has prowess is going to get +2 every turn when I play an instant or sorcery. And hopefully this will give me at least 2 of them.
Okay.
So I would save a blocker.
Alright, well, I'm gonna deal 4 to the one that I can target.
Sure, it's dead.
Okay.
With what?
Lava Coil.
You don't have any red mana left.
I do, I just tapped it.
Oh.
I tapped it.
So how many spells
And
did you
it's
play this turn?
exiled.
One shock for one red.
Yep.
Red.
Red. Yep, there you go.
Blue.
Yeah. That's it. Dead.
And I'm gonna tap 1 to adapt.
Is it exiled because it died?
Yeah, that card got exiled.
Doesn't matter. There's no.
I
decoration.
know, but
I'm gonna tap my last one to give this.
Like
+4,
you're literally just trying to
+4.
kill me, and all of the wolves are just gonna fucking destroy you.
Happy birthday, murder!
I know, right? Like I'm like, what the hell? You're not trying to win. You're just trying to kill me. And
I mean,
and that's okay.
I could kill her right now if I chose
We're all
to.
here to kill you.
what you said?
I'm just pointing out
I'm just trying
that
to
I
say.
have enough on the board to kill her.
I
if I
understand
need
that
to.
completely. You do your thing. I will swing back, and then we're gonna let one of these two win.
All right.
Like, come on.
So I'm gonna.
Well,
What are you
no.
upset about?
Good.
I'm moving.
And there's no bear deck!
I'm moving.
There's
to
tons of good mare decks.
combat.
Oh,
Yeah.
these wolves are not bears.
So, yeah.
These wolves are not
They're not.
bears.
Well, yeah. So.
You are not wrong, friend. You are not
8
wrong.
flying.
I take 8 and go to 12. All right.
I did not attack you. Go.
There we go. Off we go.
Off we fuck.
See if I survive.
Land.
We'll see if I survive.
All right. I'm gonna pay an emergence Scathe. This has protection from blue. You can't block it this turn.
Okay. Well, then that's that.
All right. And then here we
Oh,
go.
toss
It now
things in.
attacks. Oh wait, this triggers first.
I'm gonna do a full Battlestar rewatch in like 2 days.
Great.
Probably.
I'm gonna discard the elusive spell fist. Then I'm gonna play distortion strike. This
Okay.
gets +1 and unblockable.
Okay.
So that's
It's hard.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I exile 4 and play all instants and sorceries. 1, 2,
So what was the total?
3. Oh, it doesn't matter yet.
Damage?
3,
Oh.
4. All right. So it's 3, 11 right now. Oh, I don't have to pay for them, right? 12, 13, 14, 15. I can only do 15 to you. Wait.
Just.
No, it doesn't. This does 4 damage to your face. You're dead.
So 4 damage and 15?
Yeah, 4 damage to your face plus 15 with Narset.
It's only 19 though, yeah.
She's at 16.
Well, there you go.
And I'm going to lose 1 life and play 2 Storm Chase Majors to block.
Well, there you go, guys.
I'm at 11.
Good luck.
You're dead. Merry Christmas. Pass turn.
Okay.
Oh, and wait, hold on. It's even bigger than that because those 2 were cast, so I have to draw 1, discard 1. Draw 1, discard 1.
With
They're both
those
lands.
two. All right. Well, good luck, guys. Tried.
Hold on.
I'm not the threat. Bullshit.
You were the fucking threat. You were,
Come on.
And it's
Come
actually true.
You did.
you were the biggest threat in the
You
universe.
did.
You could've killed
19
me.
damage to me on that turn.
Everyone
After I got rid of most of your stuff.
Yeah.
I'm
We're not
not.
playing
Do you
Commander.
want to
We're
do
playing
that? And I'm
60.
like,
It was literally
I'm
one
gonna
creature
do
that attacked.
that.
One creature
Our
attack.
60 just feels like a commander right
I
now.
know. All right. So
arch enemy.
I have 2 things that are going to flashback for free next turn. They're going to
Chris,
rebound,
you
and
need
then
to
I have a
die.
flashback thing in my graveyard.
Everything's terrible.
Need to die.
You shouldn't have targeted me. Bullshit.
This is a regular game though.
This. So I took the Monastery Mentor out of here, and put it in the deck I played earlier, the Savine deck. Whenever you play an instant or sorcery, you get a 1/1 monk with prowess. I didn't get to play it in that game, but literally every time I play instant or sorcery, I get a 1/1 monk that gets +1/+1 every time I play an instant or sorcery. I only had 1 extra, so I put it in that deck instead of this one.
Yeah.
There's nothing good to play in my hand right now. There you go, so we'll just hang
All right, he's at 11 life. Get him.
Wait, why am I arch enemy? That's the, oh my
Are you
god!
done?
The wolf army is the arch enemy.
Do we have to repeat what just
You
happened?
get no wolves. You get 1 wolf.
You
Sorry.
just
How
did.
many-
You get 1 wolf.
How many?
How many cards do you have in
are-
your hand?
woo.
Do you have 4 cards or more?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then you get 2 wolves.
Can you give me 2 dice?
I have 60 cards in my hand here.
Yeah, I think we're gonna die to the wolf army.
No. Like,
If
I
you just swing with everything, I'm dead.
Really?
Good.
Yes.
Do it.
Do it. Do it.
4.
Did you not play anything?
6, 8, 10,
No.
12.
Your hand?
I got large cards in my hand.
I blocked 2 of them, and you... But then she
Murder
kills
mana.
you.
Well, I'd have 2 wolves.
Plan it out. So.
So many wolves.
But literally, if you can kill me right
How
now.
big are the prowess things?
1/3, 1/3. I can block 2 wolves.
Okay.
Do you need to send all the wolves at him?
Yeah.
Yeah, she has to send them all to kill me.
I still don't think that's enough to kill you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
That's 12 damage.
If you block 2,
That's 8.
you still survive.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
Oh,
to
you
do
can't attack with the 2 that just came in,
something
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, sexy.
No.
Sorry.
Get him down so Val
He's
can.
very
that's true.
intense about
Val,
the
why
farm
didn't
right
you attack with a
I know,
5/5 demon?
Because she wants it as a
now.
blocker.
Flyers.
He has flyers.
I don't have any flyers. Oh, yeah, I do now. But
Oh.
You have multiple flyers.
Yeah, that's not gonna matter.
with these 2, they're big enough to kill your demon next turn.
Do I care if I win at Magic? No.
No.
Do I care if I get to go home and lay down?
DM, I can tell the meds have worn off because it's just like, I'm not the threat, the wolves are the threat. I'm like, come on.
The wolves are the threat
Pay
right now.
attention. No, they can't
Everyone's
kill you,
a threat
and then you
in
will.
Magic.
Then you will kill NPC.
Wait.
Yeah.
Not
Dead.
enough.
Dead as you
got me
shuffle
peanuts.
dead.
You got me
Fine.
Peanuts.
I'm still gonna attack you with my wolves.
How many? The 2
Well,
that
not
can't
those
come in.
2.
Yeah.
Not these 2.
2,
These
4, 6, 8, 10, 12.
Yeah.
I block 2 of them, take 8, and go to 3.
Okay.
Am I up?
You're up.
And you only have 2 blockers?
And a lot of mana.
Don't care.
Fog.
If there's a fog, off it goes. Great. All right, these both rebound. All of my
Probably not
creatures get
surviving, but...
+2/+2.
Oh, but he has the unblockable thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're at 9. You're dead.
Oh, yeah.
This.
I see.
This has protection from green. And distortion strike.
Okay.
Okay.
Done.
So that's gonna come your way.
And how big is it?
Well, she's dead.
Yeah. Is it more
3,
than 9?
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 11.
Okay.
Just cause.
Okay. So yeah.
All right, and then I hit 4. Ready? 1,
Oh, I am curious.
2, 3, 4. Oh my God! 1 instant or sorcery.
Ha!
So this happens. I give this protection from black until end of turn. What happens to them? Where do they go? These don't rebound because they go to the
Well, you
graveyard.
already attacked, so you can't
Yeah.
attack.
No, it's okay.
Val.
I have 2 blockers, so I'm good. Unless she's got a,
Exsanguinate.
I think
Oh.
there's one this turn.
And what happens to them? They're exiled. So these cards are exiled.
It's my nightmares.
Yeah, so when you did the rebound previously on those, that was some
I can
before.
cast them, and when you cast them, they go into
I know.
exile for that purpose.
Like,
so this
when
is gonna
they
come back.
rebound, they don't come back.
Yeah. I literally didn't cast anything this turn. Past turn.
Oh no. That was a bunch of open mana.
With no cards in my hand.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about him.
Literally.
It's not that way.
Oh, wait for it. Wait for it.
You should murder that.
She can't.
Oh,
It's
well.
hexproof.
Oh, right.
Consume
Yeah.
the meek.
I
Destroy
tried.
each creature with
With what?
I tried.
that's this, and that stays. Still does 2 damage every turn. This dies because it's CMC 0.
Oh.
And these 2 both die.
I consumed the meek.
Yep.
Done? I think you're dead.
Kill him. Kill him.
Alright,
Oh,
untap.
because he
Bad
has the-
time.
During my upkeep, this comes back and I give it protection from black. So it's now 3... Oh, it's nothing. It's just a 4/3 4/3 double strike. It is unblockable. I flashback this to my graveyard to make it unblockable.
What is that terrible art?
Does it get exiled after that?
It gets exiled. I can't play it again. Alright, so it is 3, 4, 5. It's now a 5 creature. I draw a card, discard a card. I reveal 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. These stay exiled. 3. It was 5, right? 4,
Yeah.
5, 6, 7. So that's 7.
Double strike.
No, just 7.
You gave it double strike. I thought you heard you say.
No double strike.
No.
7. However, these can be flashbacked. 7, 8, 9. I can't do it. If I go down to 2, she kills me with that.
Yeah.
7. Pass turn.
You're hitting me with 7?
Yeah. 8.
Where you at?
8 total.
3.
3 to 3. You're up.
No, I'm at 2.
2.
Oh wait, then you're dead, right?
No,
No.
that's
Is that
including
thing?
taking my 2.
Oh yeah.
That's
Wait.
including taking my 2.
Oh, it's including taking that. Got it. The Jeskai Ascendancy won this game for me. I'm gonna pull it up just so people can see what it
Yeah.
looks like. That card won the game for me.
I should have just attacked you instead
What are you
of
murdering?
NPC.
You
'Cause
can't.
Then I would have killed.
It's
Then
hexproof.
I would have killed him probably.
Yeah.
Lose life.
Maybe.
I lose
Maybe.
1 life. Oh, you got it! You killed me!
Nice.
You killed me!
Nice.
What did you do?
She played a fucking thing that gives makes me lose a life, and she gains 1 and hits me for 2.
Nice.
Nice.
You got it. That's game.
Ah,
Bye, friends.
good night.
Yeah.
Good night.
So that's it.
I didn't feel
224.
as far as soon as
Happy
I
birthday
could.
to me and Jay Brewery.
Happy birthday.
Thank you all for watching us. And holy shit, Jay Brewery did an amazing job tonight of like managing the channel and getting people to subscribe
Yes.
and whatever.
Official
Yeah.
Coven management.
So
Seriously.
we have a Patreon. We've updated the rewards. If you have not had a chance to check them out, please do so. We are going to do some cool things, give some
Yeah,
cool
we
stuff
really
away
are. So
for different levels. So please
Yep.
check it
Y'all
out.
can
Ask
suggest
us
what you
questions,
like.
suggest things. We're trying to. We'll hopefully be a little. I'll try to.
We're
make
getting
sure I
better.
Get on
We're
there
getting
and
better.
be more
It's-
responsive.
like
It
this,
only took a year.
this is about our year anniversary.
casual.
Like July, August was our real year anniversary, but this is the real like,
Yeah.
hey, we actually sat down and talked about shit today.
Yeah.
And we thought of some cool ideas because we do a lot of cool things. We go to cons. We talk to
meet
magic
people.
artists.
We play with you at cons.
We play.
Yeah.
We might play with you
Yeah.
at cons. We're gonna. ElixCon is coming up where there will be a lot of artists there, so that's a good opportunity to.
Yeah.
Some of us
in
may
Reading,
bring back
Pennsylvania.
some cool
To do some
artwork
cool
or
things.
signed cards.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Follow us on all of the things, especially the Facebook page and the Instagram.
Yep.
Yep.
Good night.
And we're upgrading equipment and building a new studio to do the streaming. So,
And hopefully next
think of
week,
us.
maybe not next week, but the week after. But I'm hoping for next week we will actually be in the real studio.
We will not be in the real studio.
No.
No, we will not be in the.
We have
no.
too much on our plate this week.
yeah,
I will be straight with you.
yeah.
Always forward, never
We're
straight.
working on things. So
Yeah, always forward, never straight.
any support, just sharing the page.
Which is
Exactly.
great, so that we can get into the new studio faster
Yeah.
with your financial help.
Thanks everyone, and have a lovely evening. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Cheers. Whoop, I'm not recording. I don't want to record.
Oops.
You're stuck with us forever.
Yeah, right. Look at that. I don't know what the fuck that just
That's the
did.
recording.
Are we still
We're
live?
still live because they're stuck
Exit.
with us forever.
Why?
Oh, that's why.
Exit at the bottom.
There we go.